Friday dinner rush. Full house, 42 occupied tables, 6 tickets still hanging. I was carrying a ribeye to table 7 when the man in the gray suit swallowed his last bite and froze. His date had almost finished her chicken. She raised the final strip, swallowed, and stopped moving too. No screaming, no warning, just 2 customers turning wrong in front of my tray and knives. The man changed first. His neck widened, shoulders lifted, and hard plates pushed under his shirt like bone learning how to wear skin. The woman thinned out, sharpened up, and twitched too fast. I did not think magic. I thought heavy and slow on the left, light and fast on the right, dining room blocked, front exit useless. 8 years in kitchens teaches you to sort chaos by function. A glass shattered near the bar. Then the whole restaurant broke at once. Chairs slammed back, people rushed the entrance, one server slipped near the pass, and my manager forgot how to speak. The heavy one crushed the table edge when he stood up. Oak split under one hand. The thin one landed on a chair in a blur, head jerking at every sound like the room had turned into prey. I backed into the kitchen. Distance first, tools second, exits third. Forks were useless, pans were slow, but steel still mattered. I took a chef's knife, a boning knife, and did not wait for anyone. Miguel shouted my name from the grill. I looked once. He was holding a sauté pan like it could save him. Then the chicken thing jumped the service counter and I stopped looking back. I cut through dry storage, hit the staff exit, and ran into the alley behind the restaurant. Grease, dumpsters, broken glass, cold air. The city outside already sounded bigger than one room failing. On the avenue, the pattern hit me before the explanation did. Outside the steakhouse, thick armored things rammed cars. Across the street, lean fast bodies spilled from a fried chicken chain. 2 blocks south, a luxury seafood bar was vomiting out slick-plated creatures. East of me, a noodle shop had slower bodies with narrow limbs and loose movement. Menu was becoming threat profile. My daughter was 2 kilometers away at daycare. My wife was 3 kilometers away at the clinic. I had 1 apron, 2 knives, 1 bad route, and maybe minutes before the whole grid locked shut. The rich district ahead meant beef, shellfish, and dense protein. Too many heavy bodies, too much armor. The poorer blocks to my right meant rice, noodles, cheap chicken, and weaker conversion. So I turned right. Not because I was brave, because I knew the city through kitchens and delivery routes. If food decided the body, then neighborhood decided the fight, and route choice meant survival. At the first corner, I saw a dead scooter courier still strapped to his bike. His arms were changing even then, not rotting, not stiffening, just settling into another pattern like the body had instructions. That was when the rule landed clean in my head. It is the food, not gas, not infection, not random mutation. The last meal decides what the body tries to become, alive or dead. A heavy thing stepped out from behind a parked van and blocked the alley mouth. Expensive cologne under blood, thick jaw, plated shoulders, broad chest, steak, and a lot of it from somewhere close. I threw the boning knife first to test the chest. Bad decision, useful data. The blade hit center mass and bent sideways like soft metal against tile. Armor. Real armor. Grown from dinner. I switched grips and tried to cut left, but the lane was too short. One arm swung. I got the chef's knife up late. The impact hit through steel, wrists, ribs, and launched me into brick. My lungs folded. I slid down the wall and tasted blood. The knife was gone. The thing kept coming with the kind of slow confidence only a heavy body can afford when the target has nowhere to go. I pushed up once and my legs failed. No speech, no memories, no grand regret. Just one clean line of anger. I had lasted 11 minutes outside the restaurant and had not reached either of them. Then everything cut to white. No floor, no wall, no smell, no pain. Just a blank room and a voice as cold as a freezer door. Cook, dead at 11 minutes. Knife failure confirmed. I said the only thing that mattered. Send me back. The voice did not hurry. One conditional return is available. Accept system integration. Reject and remain here permanently. Explain fast, I said. The answer came flat. Consume living organisms. Acquire traits through accelerated assimilation. Your rate is 20 times baseline. 3 active species may be maintained. Controlled use preserves reason, it continued. Uncontrolled accumulation ends in chimera collapse. Die again after return, and this location becomes permanent. Final body reflects consume total. I understood more than I wanted to. Not magic, inventory, inputs, outputs, limits, penalties. A kitchen rule wearing apocalypse clothes. I asked the next question like I was costing a menu. What counts as living? I asked. Any viable organism with active metabolism. What counts as a trait? Structure, sense, reflex, tolerance, movement efficiency, partial weaponization. Time remaining to accept return. 10 seconds. I did not spend 8 of them pretending to be noble. I had a wife, a daughter, and exactly one chance to stop being dead. Except, I said. The white room vanished so hard it felt like a blade pulled free. I slammed back into the alley, back into pain, back into smell. My ribs still hurt. Rain dripped from a pipe beside the dumpster. The steak thing was gone, probably pulled by noise or easier meat. Above the dumpster, on a bent metal rail, a city pigeon watched me with one orange eye and did not know it had become an option. In kitchens, you stop seeing animals as symbols. You see yield, bone density, movement, fat, noise, and handling time. I looked at the pigeon and thought, light frame, sharp vision, cheap speed. I moved slow. One hand picked up a broken bottleneck. The other loosened my apron. Step, pause, angle, cover, cut. The bird fluttered once, hit metal, and went still before I could hesitate. I did not thank it. I checked warmth, tore what I could, and forced it down before my better instincts could waste time pretending they still ran my life. Blood and feathers stuck to my fingers. The system came online inside my head without drama. Pigeon assimilated, hollow bone effect, body mass minus 8%, visual acuity plus 40%, active slots used 1 of 3. A second line followed right away. Scapular growth detected. Early wing bud tissue present, non-functional. My shoulders pinched hard, like something under the skin was trying to remember a design. The change was small but immediate. My balance shifted, each step dragged less. Then my sight snapped into focus so hard it hurt. Rust on drain pipes, cracked windows, logos half a kilometer away. I found a shattered scooter mirror and checked myself. Same face, same blood at the mouth, same apron, only a hard swelling near the shoulder blades under the fabric, barely visible, but definitely there. Not stronger, not safer, just lighter, sharper, and alive again. That was enough. 2 kilometers to my daughter, 3 slots total, 1 filled, 1 city turning into a food map of predators and mistakes. I wiped the bottle glass on my apron and started walking. Poor district first, because rice and cheap chicken should mean weaker bodies. If that guess was wrong, I would not get a third lesson. I stayed off the main road and kept counting. 2 knives lost, 1 bottle shard left, 1 pigeon trait active, 2 kilometers to Lynn, 3 to May. The numbers were ugly, but at least they were real. I cut into the poor blocks because menu still meant risk. Rice, noodles, cheap broth, factory chicken, lighter bodies, less armor, 2 kilometers to Lynn, 1 active trait, no backup plan. The pigeon change shaved weight off every step. Not enough to call it speed, but enough to matter over distance. I stayed off the avenue, used alleys, and watched what food had done to the city. Outside a steamed bun stall, 3 dead workers lurched in loose patterns. Thin arms, soft torsos, weak knees. Cheap starch made them light but fragile. I killed one with brick, curb, and timing. It took longer than I liked. I still had no real weapon, only a bottleneck and what the street could provide. But the body was proof. Poor district conversions hit less hard than steakhouse monsters. I checked the corpse the way I used to check stock rotation. Skin soft, jaw weak, no plates, no claws worth fearing. If I kept route discipline, this side of the city was survivable for now. At a market corner, I saw my first living wrong ones. Not dead, not fully gone, just altered. A fish seller blinked too little and moved too smooth, like his joints had turned liquid overnight. A woman near the vegetable bin snapped her head toward every sound before anyone else did. Her shoulders twitched, her chin jerked, and her feet pecked at the ground in tiny half steps. They still talked, bargained, and looked human on the surface, but their bodies were already listening to something below thought. Worse than the dead, because the rule was still running. I stopped under a torn awning and watched for 30 seconds. The fish seller rubbed water over his forearms again and again. The bird woman flinched at a dropped coin like it was a gunshot. So it was not just the last meal of the dead, it was all food, all the time, alive or not. Eat one thing long enough and your body leaned toward it, die there, and the lean became final. That changed the city map in my head. This was not only an outbreak, it was a food chain war with delayed triggers. Most people had no idea they were building future bodies 1 meal at a time. A crash pulled me toward the fish stalls. One of the vendors had gone fully dead on his feet. His apron was soaked, his skin shone wet, and his mouth kept opening like he needed water to breathe. He came over the counter chest first, fast in a straight line, then lost traction and slapped into a crate. Slick skin, good pull, bad grip. I filed both facts and looked for something cheaper than bravery. The answer was sitting in open sacks by the scale. Coarse salt, 20-kilo bags used for fish packing. I ripped one with glass and threw a double handful at his face and neck. He convulsed so hard he knocked over 2 tubs. Skin tightened, eyes bulged, mouth opened wider, and his body lost rhythm at once. I did not understand the biology, but I understood the reaction window. I stepped in, drove the bottle shard under the jaw, then took his own fillet knife off the block before he finished twitching. New weapon, no extra cost, one dead fish zombie, route still intact. That was my first clean tactical win after the reset. Not strength, product knowledge, salt for fish, cheap countermeasure, high return. The city had become a menu, and I knew how menus broke down. I cleaned the knife on a tarp and checked the stalls. Fish everywhere, all dead on ice, all wrong for me. I needed movement, stealth, or senses next. Something that got me closer to my daughter alive. A rustle under a delivery van gave me the answer. Yellow eyes first, then whiskers, then a thin black body wedged above the axle. Alley cat, live, nervous, fast. Exactly the kind of ingredient I needed. I crouched and did the math. Cat meant speed, balance, night vision, maybe hearing, also risk. A faster body could come with faster instincts, but I was still too easy to catch in tight corridors. I used a dropped skewer as a lure, tapped metal twice, then trapped the cat against the wheel with my apron. It tore my wrist once before I pinned it. Small body, sharp work, quick loss. I ate enough to trigger the system and stopped at the first prompt. Cat assimilated, silent step minus 80%, balance plus 60%, hearing expanded, low light vision improved. A second notice hit right after. Tail growth detected, auricular reshaping in progress. My spine pinched so hard I had to grab the bumper. Then pressure spread low across my back like a hot cable. When I stood again, the world had gained edges. Drips and pipes, rats behind drywall, cloth movement 2 stalls over. My feet landed softer too, like the ground had moved up to meet them. The tail was short, ugly, and immediately useful. I hid it inside the apron knot and tested a narrow wall between 2 stalls. Before the cat trait, I would have slipped. Now I crossed without thinking. Mirror check came from a steel freezer door. Ears slightly sharper under the hairline, pupils a shade wider, posture different. Not dramatic yet. Good. I needed function, not theater. With Pigeon and Cat active, I felt lighter and quieter, but not stronger. That mattered. My kills still had to be chosen. One mistake against a heavy body and all the animal tricks in the world would end early. At the next intersection, I found a group of 5 alive and unraveling. 3 tried to keep order. 2 were already losing it. One kept growling at every passing engine. The other stared at one wall and shook. They were not dead. Their eyes tracked me. Their mouths formed words, but the wrong impulses were getting there first. Living people, half trapped behind instincts they did not know how to name. Back off, one of the sane ones said. He held a broom handle like a spear. He keeps trying to bite glass. The other one only calms down when we throw fish bones away from him. I did not step closer. Dead things follow patterns. Living things with broken patterns invent new ones by accident. That made them harder to read and much more dangerous in close range. I asked the only useful question. What did they eat? The man blinked. Whatever we found. Canned fish, fried chicken, dog food, crackers. Why? I did not waste time explaining apocalypse nutrition theory. Keep them separated from more of the same, I said. If they keep eating one thing, it gets worse. He stared at me like I had gone insane. Maybe I had. The difference was I had data now. I moved on before fear or hope could make them follow me. Every extra person was noise, hunger, and a liability. Lynn was still 2 kilometers away, and I was already burning time on lessons instead of distance. 3 blocks later, I got my first lesson from another survivor instead. A chain flashed out from behind a newspaper kiosk and wrapped my forearm. Amateur swing, decent timing, teenage hands behind it. I turned with the pull instead of fighting it and saw a skinny kid in a school jacket trying to yank my knife free. 16, maybe 17, eyes red from no sleep, face too hungry to bluff well. He expected panic. I gave him balance. Cat reflex kept my feet under me, pigeon weight kept the turn fast, and I drove him into the kiosk shutter with my shoulder before he could reset the chain. My knife touched his throat. His chain hung loose. We both froze there for 1 beat, him breathing hard, me listening for anything bigger nearby. No speech until the lane stayed clear. You move weird, he said first. Smart kid. His eyes dropped under my apron knot where the tail had slipped free. You ate something. A cat? He said it like a dare and a prayer together. Yes, I said. No point lying to someone who had already seen the evidence. His stare changed immediately. Not fear first. Calculation. That made me pay more attention to him than the chain had. And it works? He asked. For now, I said. For me. He looked at the knife, then the street, then my wrist where the cat had scratched me. For now was enough to make him step back. I let him go because killing a desperate teenager for one bad attempt would not get me to my daughter faster. Also because he had not aimed to kill. He aimed to survive. Different category. Name? I asked. Pak, he said. Short, flat, no trust in it. I gave him mine. He repeated it once, like filing it. Then he pointed north with the chain. People are marking walls for someone called Zero. I looked where he pointed. Fresh paint over old ads. North Center, safe. Come to Zero. The letters were straight, repeated and recent. Not panic graffiti. Organized. That meant leadership or a trap. You going there? Pak asked. No, I said. Anyone who had time to recruit this early also had food control, route control, and enough confidence to make promises. None of that sounded safe to me. Pak watched me another second, then nodded once. Thought so. He slipped into a side lane and was gone fast. Chain kid, quick eyes, no wasted words. If he lived, we would probably meet again. The wall signs bothered me more than the attempted robbery. Safe meant central storage. Central storage meant rationing. Rationing meant somebody would soon realize food was more than calories in this city. If Zero had already figured that out, he was ahead of most of the living. If not, he was still dangerous. Groups form around supplies faster than truth. I marked him as future trouble. My own trouble announced itself through smell. Wet fur, rot, old blood, hot breath under concrete. The dog sense had not arrived yet, but my human nose caught enough to know something alive was close. I found it in a parking alcove behind a pharmacy. Brown street dog, ribs visible, one ear torn, teeth bared over a pile of trash bags. It was alive, territorial, and far more alert than the market dead. I stood still and evaluated. Dog meant smell, tracking, and protective aggression, maybe better warning on hidden threats. The downside was obvious too. Aggression decides fast and thinks late. I needed warning range before I got anywhere near the daycare district. Beef monsters could survive one mistake. I could not. So I took the risk, set the knife down low, and baited the dog into a lunge. It committed hard, exactly like hungry animals and hungry people do. I caught the neck with the apron, twisted, pinned, and finished it fast. My forearms shook after, not from guilt, from timing stress. The system answered as soon as I swallowed enough. Dog assimilated, olfactory range multiplied by 12, protective aggression reflex added, jaw reinforcement minor. Active slots used, 3 of 3. Then the smell hit. Not one smell. Hundreds. Oil in pavement cracks, mildew in stairwells, blood on 3 different winds, old soup behind a shutter, and dead flesh moving somewhere 30 meters left. I crouched and nearly vomited while my brain tried to sort the flood. One calm system line cut through it. Filtering will improve with adaptation. Useful. Also a terrible sentence to hear. When the overload settled, the city changed again. I could map movement by scent before sound now. Dead things carried rot and menu. Living, changed people carried food signatures under sweat and fear. That meant warning, route selection, maybe tracking later. It also meant 3 active species at once. Pigeon, cat, dog, light frame, silent step, long smell, still fragile, much better informed. 3 slots full forced a new problem into focus. If I found a better trait later, something had to go. This was not stacking forever. This was menu design under pressure. Every choice would close another one. I moved again, this time faster because the dog trait let me avoid what mattered. Twice I diverted around heavy rot carrying beef and shellfish notes. Once I slipped behind a noodle-dead thing without contact. Poor district travel became an economy problem instead of a bravery problem. Distance spent, risk reduced, fatigue rising, reward delayed. 2 kilometers had turned into a chain of decisions. Near a bus stop, I saw more wall marks for Zero, but these came with arrows and boxed times. Whoever ran that center used runners, not random survivors. Structure in the first hour of collapse was a bad sign. One message had fresh handprints below it. Another had blood across the bottom, but the words still showed through. Food, water, order. I stopped there longer than I should have and read it twice. Order through food. Maybe he knew. Maybe he only guessed. Either way, the shape was clear. Someone up north was already building power around supplies while the city still called this panic. A siren cut out 3 blocks away. Then silence folded over the street so hard I heard my own breathing. The dog trait picked up fresh human scent ahead. Young, scared, uninfected, clustered in one building. Daycare, I thought at once, but the angle was wrong by half a street. Close, not there yet. I checked the painted sign on a bent pole, corrected my route, and cut through a laundry lane to save time. On the laundry line mirror of a dark shop window, I caught my outline moving beside shirts and sheets. Thin tail under the apron. sharper ears, eyes too alert. Still me, but no longer easy to explain. I kept going anyway. There was no room left for vanity. 3 active traits, 1 borrowed knife, 1 bottle shard, and maybe 20 minutes of useful light between me and whatever waited at the daycare doors. Then the dog sense pulled a clean line through everything else. Milk powder, soap, crayons, child sweat, panic, alive, ahead and slightly east. I did not need a map anymore. I had the scent of my target. I tightened my grip on the fillet knife and started running. Quiet feet from the cat, lighter stride from the pigeon, route warning from the dog. Since dying, this was my first real momentum. That was when I smelled another layer drifting over the daycare scent from the north. Cooked beef, old blood, and smoke. Not one body, several. 0 was a future problem. Heavy eaters were a current one. I slowed before the final corner and counted again because numbers kept me useful. 3 active traits. 1 knife, 1 shard. Distance to Lynn under 200 meters, hostiles ahead. I cleared the last service lane low and ready to cut. Instead of bodies, I found a chain gate, 1 overturned stroller, and a fresh arrow painted on concrete. East Mall, children, inside. The daycare doors were open and the rooms were empty. Crayons on the floor, juice on the tiles, tiny blankets left behind. On the attendance sheet, Lynn's name had 1 note beside it. Moved with mother. My knees almost failed right there. Alive was enough. Alive with May was better. East Mall sat 6 blocks away by the road and 4 by loading lanes. I took the loading lanes because numbers still mattered. The dog trait kept feeding me routes faster than thought. Coolant, bleach, rotten fruit, blood, wet cardboard, then 1 clean line cut through all of it. May's shampoo. Real, recent, close enough to chase. East Mall had half-closed shutters, welded carts, tied bed sheets, and lookout gaps cut into display boards. Someone had done more than panic here. Someone had already started counting survival as work. 2 men with golf clubs spotted me before I reached the barricade. One told me to stop. The other stared at my ears before he stared at my knife. I raised my free hand and gave them the only useful truth. My wife is Mei Han. My daughter is Lynn. They were moved here from the daycare. The men traded 1 fast look, then shouted inside. 10 seconds later, I heard Lynn call my name before I saw her. She ran out from behind a cosmetics stand in shoes that were too loose and hit my legs hard enough to hurt. May reached us a second later, grabbed Lynn and me together, and shook once without speaking. I had planned words while running. I forgot all of them. May checked my ribs, the blood on my shirt, the knife in my hand, then the pointed ears I no longer hid well. Her eyes stopped there for half a beat. "Not now," I said. "I'm still me." She nodded because panic had no value. Then a broad man in a security jacket walked over with 4 others and ended the reunion on schedule. His name was Zhang, former mall security lead, now self-appointed commander of 40 survivors, 12 barricades, 1 generator, and every rule that came with those numbers. He held a baton like rank. Zhang looked at my knife, then at Lynn behind my leg. "Weapons get checked. Food gets logged. Sleeping space is assigned. If you want safety, you follow the system here." He said safety like ownership. May squeezed my wrist before I answered. I gave up the broken glass shard and kept the fillet knife visible, but low. Zhang noticed and let it pass. Men like him always test the hinge before they force the door. He walked us through the ground floor. 40 people, maybe 42 with the fever case near the pharmacy. Children by the bookstore. Elderly in the atrium. Stores rationed, corridors divided by fear. I watched people the way I watched prep stations before service. Not for drama, for mistakes. A man near the escalator moved too smoothly, like his elbows preferred curves over angles. That was not normal. A woman near the toy shop reacted to every sharp sound before anyone else heard it. A courier at the food court kept working his jaw side to side, as if chewing calmed an animal no one else could yet see. They were alive, talking, still calling themselves people. But food had already started writing under their skin. Small traits, early instincts, no control, and no language for it. I stopped feeling special. Zhang showed me the food room like a landlord showing property. 3 crates of canned goods, 1 sack of rice, bottled water, baby formula, snack packs, and cleaning supplies locked behind the same gate. He said, "If nobody wastes anything, this lasts us a week." I looked once, counted twice, and knew he was either lying to calm people or too stupid to deserve command. Neither option helped. I answered before May could stop me. 40 people, maybe more by morning. 4 days if you cut hard. Less if you count children, fever, and the fact that rice still needs fuel to become food. The room went still enough to hear the generator downstairs. Zhang's jaw tightened. "You just got here." I shrugged. "I've spent 8 years costing food. Your shelves do not care when I arrived. He stepped closer because public authority hates public arithmetic. What I need is discipline. I kept my voice flat, then start with honest inventory. Hope built on fake portions is delayed panic. Jong looked ready to throw me out and keep the illusion. Then a side door slammed so hard the cosmetics kiosk rattled. Someone sprinted in from the loading lane, breathing through blood and dust. It was Pak, the chain kid from the crossroad. Same sharp eyes. Same posture like the world had taught him to bolt before it had taught him to trust. He pointed south and shouted without slowing down. Japanese restaurant block is breaking open. See, things are moving this way. If they reach the service entrance, they'll hit the food floor first. Half the room stared. Jong rolled his shoulders and scoffed. He called Pak a scavenger and told 2 men to drag him out if he kept spreading panic. Then the dog trait hit me with a clean line of salt, fish oil, brine, and the cold stink of wet scales. I had smelled market fish all my adult life. This was different. This was fish that had learned to move after death. I looked at Pak. How long? He answered at once. 10 minutes. Maybe less. Not enough time to argue, I said, and moved. Pak moved with me because speed recognizes speed. We ran for the southern corridor while Jong was still deciding if pride outranked a warning. The service access had 1 roll gate, 1 glass door, and stacks of promo shelves nearby. Bad for a siege. Good enough for a fast block if 2 people worked like they meant to see another morning. I took the gate. Pak stripped shelves. We jammed wheels, tied handles with extension cords, and dragged a freezer chest across the inner lane. I made him leave 1 narrow gap near the hinge line. He asked why while breathing like a chased dog. Pressure vent, I said. If the whole thing takes force at once, it fails at once. Give the hit somewhere to bleed and it lives longer. We had the block half built when Jong arrived with 3 men and a face full of command. He started with, "Who authorized this?" I answered by pointing to the corridor floor where water had begun to creep in. Not floodwater, trail water. Wet prints with shell grit, dragged slime, and seaweed. Then something hit the outer glass so hard the panel starred white. Long body, slick arms, teeth built for soft meat. Nobody argued after that. Jong swore and finally put his men to work. We dropped the last freezer, tied the gate twice, and backed off just as the first marine dead hit the barrier in a wet wave. The sound was wrong, not pounding like the steak brute from the alley. This was scraping, slapping, grinding. A pile of smaller impacts, like knives dumped into a sink and left trying to climb out. One thing forced an arm through the slot I had left. Scaled skin, webbed fingers. Pak smashed it with a fire extinguisher before I even asked. Good instinct, weak second strike. The third one solved it. When the impact slowed, Pak looked at me for 1 second too long. His eyes dropped to the tail line under my shirt, then to the ears I had stopped hiding well enough. He asked the direct question anyway. You ate something, didn't you? There was no room left for lies after the market, the corridor, and the scaled hand through glass. Yeah, I said. 3 things, on purpose. He swallowed and pushed forward. And that works? You choose it? I looked at the blocked hall, then back at him. If I control what I eat, I control what I get. The ones outside lost that part first. Pak's face shifted there. Fear stayed. Curiosity got a foothold beside it. So the crazy ones aren't bitten people. They're people who lost the wheel. I nodded. Food changed first. Mine followed. He let out a short laugh with no humor in it. That means food is the main weapon now. He said it like a kid trying on a thought larger than his own head. I answered without softening it. Food is the weapon, the armor, and the leash. That line landed in him hard. Pak did not trust me yet, but he had started trusting the logic. And logic lasts longer than fear once panic burns off. After the attack, Zhang pulled everyone into the atrium and made a speech about order, bravery, and not listening to scavengers. He thanked his watch team first. Pak rolled his eyes hard enough to squeak. He sat with a metal cup and a lunchbox of plain rice and blanched greens. No dried fish, no jerky, no snack bars, no panic eating. His body was tired, but his eyes stayed exactly, stubbornly human. I sat beside him after the speech and asked what he had been eating. He answered like a retired teacher correcting a simple question. Rice, greens, water, a little salt, same as yesterday, same as before. I asked why. He said, because panic makes people grab the strongest taste first. Strong tastes come with strong impulses. I preferred weakness over becoming strange. Not science, but not luck either. His name was Old Juan, history teacher, 68, widower, blood pressure stable before the end, and not anyone's idea of frontline muscle. He had almost no visible changes at all. That made him valuable. He was physically weaker than half the room, but he was the cleanest baseline human I had seen since the restaurant. The rule did not belong to me. I just had a faster version and sharper tools for using it. I tested him with a partial truth. What if someone used one food for speed, another for sight, a third for smell, and stopped there? He adjusted his glasses and answered without blinking. Then the problem is appetite, not power. Most people do not lose themselves because they are weak. They lose themselves because they keep taking one more bite after they should stop. Useful answer. Lynn fell asleep on folded coats by the bookstore. I checked her breathing twice, checked the southern barrier, then ran numbers against the shelves until I hated every answer inside that building. At dusk, Zhang announced the next step. We don't have the manpower to hold long. At first light, we move north to the Civic Center. Zero has a protected zone, real rations, and enough fighters to keep order. I did not need more than the name and the word rations to see the trap. If food controlled change and Zero controlled food, then Zero controlled bodies, instincts, labor, and who stayed human by permission. That was not shelter. That was monarchy with canned goods. Worse, it was smart monarchy, because desperate people would kneel to anyone who could stop their children from changing over the next 3 meals. Zhang set departure at dawn. Light packs only. Weapons surrendered before sleep. I nearly laughed at that part. A man planning to march 40 people through a dead city wanted them disarmed overnight. Pak slipped beside me after curfew and whispered, "I'm not going north with that idiot." I asked why. He shrugged once. Because a boss who lies about food will lie about anything once the gates close. I asked how much of the building he knew. More than Zhang, as it turned out. Staff stairs, loading lanes, pet storage, generator room, and one locked basement corridor used for live seasonal animals. The basement smelled like bleach, cardboard, old feed, and one clear living note under it all. Heavy, hot, musky, rooting. Not human. Pak lifted a flashlight. I lifted the knife and followed the smell. We found the cage behind artificial Christmas trees and spare display racks. Inside was a young boar from some old farm exhibit, half wild already, furious at the light, the bars, and the idea of restraint. Pak stared at me, then at the boar. Tell me you're not thinking that. I was already checking the latch, the shoulder height, and where the animal would hit first if the door shifted under force. I'm thinking armor, I said. And impact. Pak looked sick and fascinated in equal parts. You say traits like you're ordering ingredients. I answered before I could soften the truth. I am. The kill was ugly because boars are built to keep their insides private. We used cage bars, a looped cord, and the fact that rage commits animals to bad lanes. When it finally dropped, my arms were shaking. I ate before I could waste time on morality as delay. The system cut in cold and precise. Boar assimilated, forearm and shin plates, strike force times 2.4. Charge reflex available under load. Then the cost line followed. Active species limit reached. Select one slot for replacement. I had pigeon, cat, and dog. Weight, stealth, and smell. I stood there and made a cook's version of war. The pigeon had saved distance and sight, but the cat already covered stealth and balance, and the dog covered tracking. What I needed next was survival at contact range. Not grace, not height. Contact. I dropped the pigeon. The change hit fast. Shoulder buds receded, the lightness faded, and new density spread down both arms and legs like bone being poured into sleeves. My stance changed on the concrete. Pak saw hard bands rise under the skin of my forearms and took one step back before catching himself. That one looked worse, he said. Feels worse too, I answered. Useful and ugly overlap a lot. I told May first, because hiding changes from your wife only works in stories written by idiots. She touched the new ridges under my sleeves and asked the only question that mattered. Can you still stop? So far, yes. It was not the answer she wanted, but it was the only honest one. She looked toward Lynn sleeping under a coat and said, "Then stop before the world stops you." Fair requirement. Before dawn, I spoke to the people most likely to think instead of follow. Pak, May, Old Juan, Sister Lee, a nurse already noting symptoms. Tan, a builder, 2 brothers, a quiet cashier, a pharmacy runner. I laid the equation out clean. Zero controls food, food controls change, change controls behavior. If we go north under his ration line, we stop choosing our own bodies. Then choice gets expensive fast. Old Juan added the calm version. A hungry man can obey for 1 meal and call it temporary. By the 4th, obedience feels normal. By the 10th, dependency starts to feel like gratitude. Good line. Sister Lee asked the practical question. If we stay, what do we have? I answered with numbers. Food for 4 days if counted honestly. Water for 3.5, 1 defendable floor, Too few fighters. Pak asked, and if we leave with Zhang? I answered with other numbers. 40 bodies on open streets, kids in the middle. Unknown rules at the destination. One man controlling rations. Bad trade. Morning split the room clean. Zhang raised his baton and made it official. Anyone who wants protection moves north with me. Anyone staying behind refuses group authority and loses claim to shared supplies. 28 went with him. Fear likes lines, and Zhang offered one. The rest stayed because logic beat fear in them by a narrow margin, or because they had someone too young or too old to gamble on 0. When the count finished, we had 12. Me, Mei, Lin, Pak, Old Wan, Sister Lee, Tan, 2 brothers named Jun and Ho, a cashier, a pharmacy runner, one mother with a broken wrist and hard eyes. I watched Zhang's column file out with clubs, bags, children, and hope packed in all the wrong places. I did not envy him, and I did not forgive him for making people choose under a clock he barely understood. I looked at the team that remained and made the first leadership choice. We're not waiting for rescue. We're not going north. Every meal gets counted, every trait gets watched, and every exit gets mapped. Nobody clapped. Good. Applause is useless stock. Pak just grinned once like he had bet on the right lunatic. Old Wan nodded. Sister Lee asked for paper. Mei asked where I wanted the food log started. I moved us to the grocery floor before noon, not because it was safe, because it had what panic burns first: sealed food, fixed shelves, and enough doors to turn movement into a system. After the split, I counted stock before I counted courage. 12 mouths. Food for 9 days if portions stayed tight. Water for 6 if nobody wasted a cup. One bad choice could cut both numbers in half. Pak stole a shopping basket and turned it into a field desk. Mei logged every can, bag, and bottle. Old Wan sorted shelf life. Sister Lee pulled medicine out before fear could swallow it. I walked the aisles like they were prep stations. Rice, noodles, beans, oil, sugar, canned fish, jerky, fruit, salt, vinegar. Food now meant traits later, not just calories and comfort. A shelf was no longer just inventory. It was future behavior, possible weakness, combat profile, and risk of mental drift. We were not storing meals anymore. We were storing versions of ourselves. I set the first rule in under 10 minutes. Nobody eats the same thing for more than 2 straight meals unless I approve it. Complaints started fast. Good. Complaints mean the brain still works. The cashier asked if that was control. I said yes, but not Zero's kind. Zero would force one trait on everyone. I wanted rotation, logs, and room to pull people back before instinct took over. Pak unfolded a dirty city map from a tourist rack downstairs. He marked the mall, side exits, parking ramp, rooftop tanks, and 3 streets that still showed fresh movement and broken glass patterns. Then I added the part only I could. North got seafood marks in blue. West got red blocks for meat houses and grills. East got pale circles for rice shops and thin calorie zones. South was the ugly section. Apartment towers, corner stores, roof tanks, and no clean pattern. Too many homes, too many leftovers, too many people eating whatever they could grab. South meant live instability. The map stopped looking like a city and started looking like a hostile pantry. Pak stared at it, then at me. You can really smell and guess all that? I tapped my nose. Estimate. That was enough for him. It was enough for me too. Perfect information was dead. We needed useful information, fast choices, and enough discipline to survive our own appetites one more day. By dusk we had sectors, rations, sleeping spots, and 2 fallback doors. It was still a weak base, but it had shape. Shape matters. Chaos kills faster when rooms do not have assigned jobs. Before sleep, I added a second rule. Nobody stores private food. Hidden stock means hidden traits, and hidden traits mean hidden failures. The room hated that rule more than the first one. I kept it anyway. I gave every person one visible function. Mei held stock. Pak ran routes. Old Wan settled disputes. Sister Lee tracked bodies. Tan reinforced shutters. The rest carried, cleaned, watched, or learned the board. We built a quarantine corner from pharmacy racks, tape, and shopping carts. Cheap materials, high value. If another unstable survivor came in, I wanted distance already priced into the floor plan. The first knock came after dark. 3 hits, pause, then 2 more. Human rhythm, scared hands. Dung moved to the barricade with a mop handle. I stopped him before he played hero with junk. Tan reinforced the freezer doors with shelf brackets and mop handles. It looked stupid. Good. Stupid things survive longer than elegant ones when all your tools come from the cleaning aisle. There were 3 survivors outside the lower service shutter. 2 women and 1 man, thin, wet, exhausted, carrying 1 school bag between them. The man kept his feet too wide, like balance annoyed him. We checked them through the gap first. Names, injuries, what they ate, where they came from, what they wanted. Hunger makes liars sloppy. Fear makes them repeat. I listened more to rhythm than words. The woman on the left said she was Nurse Lee from a clinic south of the mall. The other was her younger cousin. The man was Min. They had lived on canned fish, crackers, and tap water. At fish, I looked at Min harder. His eyes slid before his head did. His shoulders rolled in small corrections. When Pak scraped metal on wood, Min turned toward the sound before thought caught up. He was alive, breathing fast, sweating, answering questions. But the wrong thing was already swimming in him. Not a bite, not infection, pattern, diet, too much fish, and a mind starting to lose ground. I opened the shutter 1 foot and made them stand under the lamp. Sister Lee checked pupils, pulse, grip, and skin heat. Min kept staring past us toward reflection and movement more than toward faces. Pak muttered, "Zombie?" I shook my head. Worse in one way. Dead things are simple. This one can still choose for maybe another day. Min heard me and looked straight at me in panic. I let them in because turning them away taught us nothing and cost us labor. But I did not let them mix. Min got the pharmacy stockroom, 1 mattress, 1 bucket, 1 light, and 0 fish. His cousin snapped at that. Said he was not an animal. I answered with math. If he shifts in there, I lose 1 room. If he shifts out here, I lose 3 people before breakfast. Old Juan backed me at once. That mattered. Authority from me looked like mutation and knives. Authority from him looked like memory and reason. Together, the rule sounded less like fear and more like order. Sister Lee asked the question I wanted first. What exactly did he eat in the last 4 days? The answer came in pieces. Fish cans, fish balls, dried squid once, almost no grain or greens. That was enough for a working theory. I said it so everyone heard it. Food pushes change forward. Maybe if we cut the source fast enough, diet can also weaken the same pull before it wins. Sister Lee's eyes sharpened at once. She asked for a notebook, tape, and a marker. Pak found all 3 in a school kiosk below. 10 minutes later, she had the first real chart in our system. Name, foods, visible changes, behavior shifts, sleep, aggression, sensory response, recovery. She built the list like a nurse who had accepted that dinner was now medicine, poison, and weapon all at once. Min became our first controlled test. Breakfast, rice porridge only. Noon, beans and water. Night, noodles with oil, no fish. Sister Lee checked him every 4 hours. I checked him whenever I passed. The first 12 hours were ugly. He sweated hard, slept in bursts, and snapped at motion. Twice he hit the inside of the stockroom door when pipes knocked through the wall. Instinct still had teeth. By the second day, the pattern changed. He still tracked sound too quickly, but he answered with less delay. His hands shook less. He looked at faces longer. The fish was not gone. It was retreating. That shifted our scale more than any kill. If diet could push a person toward instinct, then diet could also pull them back before the fall completed. Food was not just fuel now. It was policy. I revised the map at once. North was no longer seafood danger alone. It was proof that whole districts could be bent by repeated menus. Organize meals and U-shape bodies first and choices second. The others felt the weight of that before they had words for it. May started separating stock by trait risk. Old Juan asked for a neutral diet list. Pak stopped joking every time I said rotation. Just sure. May started a neutral meal list for the weak and the children. Rice, beans, diluted porridge, fruit syrup cut with water. Minimal trait pressure, steady calories, and fewer surprises during sleep. We needed water before thirst made everyone stupid. The mall had drinks, but not enough clean reserve for 12 people beyond 6 days. South had rooftop tanks and a chance to stretch us to 9. Pak volunteered before I asked. Fast feet, light frame, no family to argue with him in front of the team. I still made him state the trade before we moved. A runner should learn numbers early. He got it right on the second try. We go south, risk live unpredictables, maybe gain 3 days of water. Old Juan asked, and if you fail? Pak answered, then we spend strength and reveal routes. I kept dog, boar, and crow empty for the run. Then I corrected myself. Crow was not mine yet. The real set was dog, cat, boar, dog for scent, cat for quiet, boar for impact. Cat had better stealth than Pigeon ever did, and the stairs would punish noise. Pigeon had saved me once, but early traits become dead weight if they stay after their window closes. Survival hates nostalgia. Pak added smell notes to the map after our run. Not words from me, just his own language. Rot slick, meat heavy, pond air, bleach house. He was learning to translate danger into something repeatable. We left before dawn through the parking ramp with 2 fold carts, 4 empty jugs, rope, duct tape, and 1 pry bar. May hated the risk. She still packed our load list better than I would. The South Street smelled wrong before sunrise. Mold, old soup, piss, wet concrete, spoiled rice, blood, fish oil, and live sweat sharpened by confusion. Too many kitchens, no order. A dead city sounds different when the living still move inside it. Long stillness, then one dropped pan 6 floors up. A baby cries once and stops. A radio hisses in a room nobody answers. Pack moved well, not trained, just city smart. He stepped where glass was already cracked, not where it would sing. He watched windows first and doorways second. I watched smell first, then corners, then shine. At the 3rd apartment block, dog scent pulled me left. Human male, alive, adrenal, moving low. Then another smell under it. Dirty fur, old blood, stale chicken, panic, and the hot dust smell of nerves. We found him in the service courtyard between towers. Middle-aged, shirtless, crouched wrong on the balls of his feet. Nails black, head twitching, eyes locking onto movement too hard. He had cat traits, but no cat control. Fast focus shifts, sudden stillness, explosive movement. He was not dead, and that made him dangerous in a different way. Dead things repeat. Live ferals improvise. Pack raised his pipe. I pushed it down. No fight unless he chooses it. We had water to steal from a roof, not pride to waste in a courtyard. The feral man watched us and sniffed once. Then he burst sideways up a trash cage, across a balcony rail, and vanished into shadow with a speed that made even my cat balance feel slow. Pac swore under his breath. I memorized the route. And so that's what happens if you don't control it, Pot whispered. I nodded. Not all at once. That's what makes it worse. We kept moving, and after that, both of us respected silence much more. The rooftop tank sat on Tower B under rusted pipes in a dead satellite dish. The gate had a cheap chain. Pot cut it with bolt cutters we had almost left behind to save weight. Bad idea avoided. We worked in pieces. I watched the stair heat and sent lines. Pock filled the jugs. 6 minutes in, we had 20 liters. 9 minutes in, 36. At 10, I caught a new scent above us. Bird, live, dark feathers, oily scent, alert. I looked up and saw a crow on the rail staring down like I had interrupted its shift. It did not flee when I met its eye. That mattered. In kitchens, some animals panic and some assess. I saw root memory, mimicry, urban intelligence, and problem solving. Useful traits usually arrive wearing trouble, and timing never arrives clean. Pock saw my face and already knew I had started calculating. Seriously? He whispered. Now? I nodded. A good ingredient does not wait for my schedule. He rolled his eyes and kept filling the jugs. I used bread from my pocket and a strip of plastic from the tank seal. The crow hopped closer twice, head angled, arrogant even at the end. I trapped it against the rail and finished it fast. Eating live things was not easier because I had done it before. It was only faster. I swallowed what I could while Pock pretended not to watch, which meant he watched everything and said nothing useful. The system answered hard and clean. Crow assimilated, spatial memory grid to 2 kilometers, auditory mimic baseline unlocked, ocular pigment shift detected, slot load 3 of 3 maintained. My eyes darkened first. The rooftop edges snapped into relation with every lane we had crossed. It was not distance vision. It was root vision. I could hold the district in my head like folded wiring. Then came the afterfeel, pressure behind the ears, a prickling line through the hair. I touched the skin there and felt new stiff growth under it. Not true feathers yet, but moving in that direction. I had to drop a slot to stabilize. Cat or dog? Crow already paid for itself in map value. Dog scent warned me before corners. Cat stealth had kept noise low. I cut cat and kept the rest. What changed? Pock asked while I wrote out the dizziness. Map in my head, better sound patterns, worse face for civilian morale. He grinned once. You had that problem already. Now it has texture. We hauled the full jugs down 2 flights before the south stair filled with wet slapping steps. Not one body, several. Fish movement, but not dead heavy. Live. Pock looked at me and I did not need words. We abandoned the last empty containers to save speed and went out across the laundry roofs instead of the main stairs. That cost us 8 liters of possible gain and bought us our lives. Fair exchange. On the final roof bridge, 1 live fish changed came into view below. Woman, maybe 30, knife still in hand, moving toward reflected light on glass instead of toward the open lane. That image stayed with me longer than any corpse. Dead monsters are endings. Living people using trained hands while instinct drags their attention sideways are warnings. We were building against that. We got back with 36 liters, 1 bruised shoulder, and a cleaner sense of scale. Water rose from 6 days to 8.5 if strict use held. Pak called it a win, so did I. Min was waiting in his stockroom when I checked him. He looked worse from exhaustion, better from control. He answered my questions without chasing vent sounds with his eyes. The diet rule was holding so far. Sister Lee showed me her notes. Not reversal, she said. Suppression, maybe redirection later, but this proves the slope is not one way. I nodded. Good. Then Zero's method can be fought with kitchens. By evening, we had a working map, a water extension, an isolation protocol, and the first evidence that controlled diet could slow instinct takeover. That was worth more than another shelf of canned meat. Then the stories about Zero got worse. 2 late arrivals from the East Food Court had heard his name from painted walls and frightened mouths. North Center safe, come to Zero. Same words, fresh paint. Fresh paint means organization. Repeated wording means system. Safe means bait unless proven otherwise. Pak traced the route on the map and whistled low. He's advertising. I said, no, he's recruiting stock. The late arrivals gave more once they ate. Zero fed people one thing at a time. Large portions, tight schedules, no choice after intake. Some got stronger, some got stranger. Refusal meant exile with 1 meal. That fit everything we had seen. Feed enough fish and you get listeners, swimmers, and light chasers. Feed enough beef and you get mass, armor, and push force. Traits were no longer random. They were logistics. Old Juan sat very still after hearing it. Then food is law now, he said. I corrected him. Food is deeper than law. Law needs consent. Food works on people who never agreed to anything. By the end of day 2, the grocery floor had sectors, logs, a quarantine room, route notes, and ration control. That was enough to call it a base, even if the walls still lied. He did not argue. Good. Some truths only need 1 clean sentence before they move in and start paying rent. This one was going to run our floor whether people liked my face or not. I rewrote our board before sleep. Water, plus 36 liters. Food, 9 days. People, plus 3. 1 isolated. Risks, South Ferals, North Seafood Clusters, West Heavy Meat Zones, 0 rising. I added 1 more line under all of it. Not for morale, for memory. Eat with control or lose yourself. Pak read it first and snorted. Simple. I said, simple rules are the ones that kill late. He jerked his chin toward Min's room. And if we can drag people back? I looked at the charts, then at the shelves, then at the map in my darkened eyes. Then we build around that. What we had was not a shelter anymore. Not just that. It was the first draft of a controlled zone with rules, stock logs, treatment notes, rotation, and a city menu turned into military intelligence. I checked the perimeter once before trying to sleep. North smelled of brine and shell. West smelled of blood and fat. South smelled of live confusion. East smelled weak but noisy. Appetite had zoned the city. And somewhere beyond the painted walls, Zero was doing the same math from the other side. The difference was simple. He wanted 1 food, 1 instinct, 1 herd. I wanted choice, and that was why war was coming. By the start of the 2nd week, we had stopped acting like trapped shoppers and started acting like a small machine. Head count, 18. Food, 11 days. Water, 9. Power, limited but real. The solar panels on the roof fed 3 extension lines into our floor. Enough for lights in 2 corridors, 1 cold room, and Sister Lee's treatment corner by the stairs at night. Our mini garden was still a promise, not a solution. Tan built planters from drawers and produce crates. The soil bags we found meant 1 week to the first green shoots at best. We had 3 defensive lines. First at the loading corridor with wired carts. Second at the freezer hall with oil bottles overhead. Third at the grocery choke near pharmacy storage. I rewrote the board at dawn before breakfast. 18 mouths, 11 food days, 9 water days, 3 lines, 1 roof source, 1 bad raid, and the whole board turned into fiction. Pak also started carrying chalk in 1 pocket and fish scales in another. Chalk for route marks, scales for smell tests. He said if the world ran on food now, scouting had to smell like math. Pak had become my eyes outside the floor plan. He ran routes, timed stairwells, tracked noise pockets, and came back grinning even when his shoes were cut and his hands were bleeding through old tape. He used fish on purpose in tiny doses before scouting runs. Not enough to slide into stupidity, just enough to smooth movement and hold breath longer in flooded service tunnels. The change in him was visible if you looked carefully. His turns got cleaner, his shoulders rolled with less waste. He noticed it himself and laughed once. So I was clumsy before the apocalypse. Good to know. Old Juan stayed almost entirely human by design. Rice, oats, canned beans, boiled greens. He said he was too old to gamble on instincts he had not personally invited into his bones. He became our second voice in every argument. When I gave a hard rule, he translated it into something people could live with. When I looked like a threat, he looked like proof that control was still possible. Sister Lee had turned one pharmacy shelf into a record wall. Names down the left, food down the center. Changes on the right. Skin, smell, reflex, sleep, aggression, hearing, appetite, tremor, fixation, speech. Me ran the stockroom better than I ever ran a dinner rush. She tracked dry goods, rotation, spoilage, boil times, water draw, and who stole extra portions from the board. Her own body had changed less than almost anyone else's. Lee checked the log and found the reason fast. May ate by habit, not panic. Mixed grains, fruit, soup, tea, bits of everything. Dong was our biggest fighter after me, and the most dangerous man inside the base for reasons unrelated to enemies. Before all this, he had worked security and trusted force too much. He ate meat whenever he could get it. Canned beef, jerky, sausage, emergency protein. His reflexes sharpened in one direction only. More forward, less patient, quicker to press than think. He had not yet admitted the food link even after seeing me work, but he was starting to notice himself. He flared faster, slept lighter, stood too close in arguments. He called it stress. Lee called it pattern. Tan was the opposite kind of useful. Not fast, not dramatic, but give him scrap, wire, brackets, tape, and one clear function, and he turned waste into infrastructure by evening. His hands had changed from the rough diet he had fallen into. Grains, roots, canned vegetables, dried seaweed. The skin thickened enough for him to carry hot metal longer than me. Tan hated speeches, so he explained things with examples. A bracket here meant 1 more minute to hold a door. 1 more minute at a door meant 3 people reaching the stairs instead of none. He used that gift without romance. Doors, braces, vent covers, shelf anchors, stove plates, lamp guards, rain catch hooks. Every hour Tan worked became 3 fewer things for me to solve with teeth and panic. Our day started with count, not prayer. Water first, then portions, then labor, then trait review, then perimeter. Anyone skipping the board got pulled back and rebriefed on the spot. The biggest difference between us and the people outside was not strength. It was repetition. We were turning survival into procedure, and procedure keeps families alive longer than courage does. I built a rotating watch chart under the ration log. Too much hawk vision in one shift gave me headaches, so Pak and Dong took distance watch while I handled scent checks and hard alarms. That morning, Dong watched me rewrite my active set on the margin of the board. Dog, boar, crow. He stared longest at the last word, then at the dark tint in my eyes, then at the ridge under my shirt. He asked loud enough for everyone to hear. How much more of that thing are we supposed to pretend is normal? Nobody moved. Even Pa stopped smiling. It was the first time he had decided to test me in public. I kept writing the ration column before I answered. Normal died with the first dinner service. Then I faced him. Useful is still alive. If that changes, say so with numbers. Dong stepped closer. People are scared of you. I asked the question back without raising my voice. Of me? Or of what gets through that shutter if I stop going outside? It landed. Not victory, just silence. Old Juan used the gap well. Fear is not a policy, he said. Inventory is. Protection is. Control is. If you want to argue, argue replacement value. Who replaces way outside? No one had that answer, including me. Dong looked away first, not beaten, just forced into arithmetic in front of witnesses. That mattered more than humiliation ever would. After breakfast, Sister Lee pinned up a new chart. 5 days of logs and Min's isolation case gave her a pattern map. Repeated food under stress caused faster drift in body and mind. Controlled variety slowed everything. Purposeful intake gave specific gains if monitored. Panic eating caused overlap and instinct leaks. Her notes were tiny. The meaning was larger than any knife. She pointed at 3 names. Min on fish, Dong on meat, Pak on scouting doses, then at May herself and Old Juan. Mixed diets, low drift, stable decisions, cleaner sleep overall. This is not only about Wei, she said. We can steer everyone, not to monster levels, but enough to cut losses and stop people from sliding into ferals by accident over time. I saw the scale first. If she was right, food was not just rationing, it was command structure. A meal plan could shape our future harder than another crate of knives ever could. So I made the call immediately. Every person records every meal from this hour on. Quantity, source, symptoms, sleep, cravings. Pot groaned. The cashier muttered that it sounded like 0. Pack protested the log rule for exactly 20 seconds, then started adding his own symbols for speed, smell, and noise tolerance after each meal. Typical. He hated structure until he could improve it. I let that sit, then cut it clean. Zero takes choice away. I'm doing the opposite. You log what you eat so you can keep your choice tomorrow. If you want freedom, learn what it costs to keep it. Old Juan backed that line without softening it. A system can chain you or protect you, he said. The difference is whether you are allowed to understand it. That delayed the backlash. We needed infrastructure to match the doctrine. Gas from portable canisters would last 4 days. After that, cold food meant worse morale and sloppier eating from people trying to feel full. Tan solved half of it with scrap from housewares. He built a boxed stoveplate that sat over wood, vented through the old bakery duct, and held 2 pots without collapsing. Wood was the other half. First floor display shelves had plenty, but hauling them up cost labor and exposure. We made the trade anyway. 2 hauling teams, 1 overwatch, 1 hour max. The new production chain went on the board in marker. Gas, 4 days. Wood stove by day 3, fuel from first floor, boil line for water, cook line for grains and broth. People behave differently when steam rises from a pot, not because soup is magic, because warm food makes the future feel longer than the next half hour. That counts as medicine now. Lai wanted a treatment stock chain too. Alcohol, gauze, antibiotics, painkillers, splints, gloves. We had pieces of all of it and enough of none. The lower pharmacy still held more. Pack mapped 3 routes to that lower section. Main escalator was exposed. Service stairs were narrow, but shadowed. Atrium descent was fastest, and most likely to draw heavy west side feeders. Our protein stock was dropping faster than I liked. Boar gave me armor and impact, but cost calories to use hard. Dog gave detection. Crow gave mapping. None of that solved reach. Pac brought the answer back by accident. Pet store, 800 meters east, he said. I heard wings in cages, bigger than pigeons. That changed the afternoon immediately. Lee asked, worth the risk? I did the numbers aloud. Food stable 4 days, medicine tighter, threat density rising. Better surveillance saves people before fights start. High risk, high return. I took Pac for route speed and Dong for carrying power. He looked surprised when I named him. Good. Trust given under tension is harder to waste than trust given too easily. Before leaving, I gave May the clean version of the numbers. If we failed, she had enough stock for 3 quiet days and enough water to pull everyone to the roof if the lower floor fell. We moved at 1400 when the light made long reflections in the mall glass and pulled the wrong kind of attention to the open lanes. Dog smell kept us off 2 active clusters before we saw either one. The east wing was quieter than it should have been. That meant recent feeding or a stronger thing had claimed the corridor. I signaled slow and kept the boar reflex leashed. Pack led through the card shop, over a collapsed display, then through a torn gate into family stores. The pet shop sign hung half down. The smell hit first. Seed, fur, waste, fear. We found dead cages first. Hamsters gone, rabbits gone, 2 cracked reptile tanks. In the back room, under a tarp, we heard it again. Stronger now. Wing strikes, controlled, angry. It was a young hawk in a transport crate, probably brought in for a private buyer before the city ended. Gray-brown back, pale chest, bright eye that tracked all 3 of us as separate problems. Good sign. Dong whispered, "You're serious about eating that?" I answered without drama. I'm serious about seeing 100 meters before trouble sees us at 10. Logic beat disgust for 1 minute. We had another problem before I opened the crate. Something had followed the same smell trail. 2 shell-backed seafood dead pushed into the storefront, slow but hard, drawn by blood. Pack held the front with a pole snare, while Dong rammed a bagged kibble shelf over as a brace. I cut 1 hamstring line and let the second body jam the doorway behind it hard. The blocked doorway bought maybe 20 seconds, no more. Enough to choose once, not enough to reconsider. That was fine. Most good decisions in this city were just fast trades that happened to hold. With the front blocked for seconds, not minutes, I turned back to the crate. The hawk hit the bars once, twice, then fixed on me with the calm hatred only captive things know well. I opened it anyway. Capturing an animal is not the hard part. Deciding to cross the line again in front of witnesses is harder. I did not make it moral. I snapped the neck and ate fast anyway. The system hit like glass under a blade. Hawk assimilated. Vision up 8-fold on motion. Grip and strike reflex improved. Keratin density rising in fingers and nails. Replacement pending. I dropped Crow first. The map stayed in memory, but the live effect slid out of my nerves like a current going dark. Hawk took its place so cleanly I nearly staggered in place. The room came apart into layers. Dust and air currents. Wing marks on the tarp. Pak's pulse in his throat. Dong favoring an old knee. Tiny things. Too many things. Useful things. My fingers hurt. The nails darkened and hardened. The joints felt tighter, more aligned for quick closure. Not claws. Just a hand learning a different job under pressure. Dong had seen the whole process. Not the rumor version. The blood, the swallowing, the body answer after. His face shut down first, then reopened into something harder than disgust. On the walk back, Hawk vision kept dragging my attention upward. Exit signs, cracked cameras, loose wires, dust trails near vents. Vertical detail had become impossible to ignore, useful but exhausting. He said nothing on the way back. That silence mattered more than a speech. Some men use words to avoid changing their mind in public. Dong was past that stage now. He had moved into dangerous private thought. The return route turned ugly near the stationery store. A feral from the south quarter cut across the hall at a dead sprint, alive, thin, wrong in every angle. Cat traits, no leash left in the head behind them. I smelled it late because it was alive and nearly clean. Hawkeyes gave me the line half a second before impact. I took the hit on my left side, turned with it, and drove Boar weight through the shoulder. We hit the floor together. It slashed low, not at my throat, but at movement itself. Dong kicked it off me. Pak wrapped the snare around one arm. We pinned, then disengaged. Pak asked why I had not killed it after the pin. Because live ferals teach more than dead ones, I said. Also because I was tired of every problem ending with a throat in my hands. That choice cost us pride and saved us blood. I did not want a hallway duel with something that still had human problem solving under the static. We backed out in formation and let it keep the corridor. Back at base, Lee measured the Hawk changes like chemicals. Pupil speed up, better target lock, stronger hand closure, sharper head turn reflex, less mood drift than Boar. Good news. The board changed again. Active set, dog, Boar, Hawk. Detection at range, armor and impact, long arc visual tracking, trade-off, detail overload in crowded spaces, avoid busy lanes on watch. Dong spoke that night during ration check. No public challenge this time. Just one question. Does it still feel like you in there after each change? Honest question. Bad timing. I answered honestly because a lie would break later. Yes, but it takes work now, not habit. He nodded once, not satisfied, but willing to store the answer and test it later. 2 days later, he broke the one rule I needed him to obey. We were low on antibiotics and anti-inflammatory packs after treating Min and 3 infected hauling cuts already. Dong decided controlled meant slow. He took 2 volunteers before dawn without board approval and went down the West Service Hall. No dog screen, no route timing. He called it initiative. I called it theft from the survival budget when Pak brought me the empty slot and no return time. By noon, Dong was back with 1 volunteer, 3 medicine boxes, and excuses. The missing volunteer's name was Hyan. 23, pharmacy runner, weak left ankle, habit of chewing bottle caps when nervous. Numbers or memory when guilt starts trying to blur faces. The 3rd man came back an hour later and not as himself. He was still breathing, still bleeding from a torn calf, still saying words. But the words were fragments, and his focus kept sliding to scent and sound. He had eaten whatever he found when they got separated. Canned meat, sugary cereal, fish jerky, probably more. Stress stacked on chaos, chaos stacked on hunger, and hunger finished him. Lee got him into isolation with Pak's help before he hurt anyone. By then his pupils were wrong. His breathing jumped on random cues, and he lunged once at the scrape of a spoon like metal had insulted him. I turned on Dong in front of the team because private correction would have looked like weakness after a public breach. You lost 1 man for 3 boxes and a shortcut, I said. Do that again and you leave. He fired back because shame only knows 1 language at first. You eat things into power. You're not human enough to order humans around. There it was, finally said clean. May did not defend me. That helped. Blind loyalty would have made Dong louder. She just slid the medicine boxes onto the table and asked Lee what part of the hall was still worth the man we lost. The room froze. May stopped marking cans. Pak half rose. Old Juan did not intervene yet. He let the words sit so everyone could measure them against what they had already seen me do for them. I answered with the part nobody likes. Then count outcomes. Since we set rules, no one here drifted by accident except the man you took off record. Before that, collapse was close. Dong's jaw locked, but he listened. Good. Listening angry is still listening. I pointed at Lee's board. Want another chain of command? Build one with lower losses, then talk to me. Old Juan stepped in only after the arithmetic was on the table. Moral discomfort is not irrelevant, he said, but it does not excuse incompetence. That hit Dong harder than my voice. We kept Dong because throwing away muscle under pressure is a luxury for better societies. We cut his freedom instead. No solo runs, no team lead, no live capture decisions. That night, the isolated volunteer turned fully feral for 12 minutes. Not dead. Worse. Alive, fast, with enough tool memory left to work the door latch instead of only slamming it. Lai recorded everything. Trigger sounds, food list, duration, muscle pattern, recovery window. When the man calmed, he cried because he remembered enough to know what had happened. That was when our base stopped being only a food problem and became a legal one. What do you owe someone whose body is alive, but whose mind comes and goes each hour under your roof? The next morning, Pak smelled perfume before I did. Wrong kind. Clean clothes, soap, full stomachs, visitors from a place with stable stock. We moved to positions before the knock finished. 2 men stood outside with fresh shoes, sealed rain capes, and the posture of people who had not needed to run for a meal in days. Zero's hand was visible from the collar down. They asked for me by description, not by name. The cook with animal traits once said, "Zero heard about you, says rare assets should be brought under management before fear wastes them." I opened the gap just enough for them to see my eyes and the people behind me, but not enough for them to count the full layout. "Tell Zero I'm busy keeping my own people alive," I said. I opened the gap just enough for them to see my eyes and the people behind me, but not enough for them to count our entire layout. "Tell Zero I'm busy keeping my own people alive," I said. The taller one smiled like he sold contracts before the world ended. "He offers structured rations and stable plans. You offer mutation by guesswork." He said it loudly for the team. So I answered loudly too. I offer choice, records, and results. He offers obedience with a spoon. That landed behind me as much as in front. I wanted the team hearing it. The second envoy let his eyes travel over the shelves, stove line, chart wall, water stacks, pox maps, Tan's braces on the doors. He saw enough to revise his report upward. "Zero also says men like you should not decide their own shape for too long," he said. "Too unstable." I rested one darkened hand on the shutter. He should study himself first. They left without threatening us directly. Professionals rarely need theater. As their steps faded, Pak muttered, "They saw the charts." May added, "And the stock, and the team." I went straight to the board and raised risk priority above the food line for the first time. Zero aware of our location. Numbers uncertain. Capability partially visible. Pressure now inevitable. Old Juan watched the marker dry. "War by appetite," he said. "That may be the ugliest form humans ever invented." I shook my head. "No. The ugly part is how fast it scales." Lee folded her notes and looked at all of us. "Then we scale faster," she said. Not louder, not prouder, just faster. Hearing it from her steadied the room by 3 degrees. I closed the day with hard numbers because fear loves vagueness. Head count 18, food 10.5 days, water 8.5, gas 3, wood stove functional, risk rising. Then I added the line nobody liked and everyone needed. Control is now our main industry. Pak snorted. May did not. Dong stared at the floor. Lee wrote it into the ledger. When lights went low, I checked my hands again. Dark nails, thickened joints, sight too sharp for sleep. The base behind me breathed like a machine, finally learning its own rhythm. I moved the risk board above the ration board and no one argued. 18 people. Food 10.5 days, water 8.5, gas 3. Oil 16 liters, quiet almost gone. Pak saw the first watchers from the freezer vent over the south lane. He came back without jokes, which meant the problem was real. 3 of them, same route twice, same pause points. I took the roof with hawk sight and dog scent. He was right. They were alive, not dead, but their movement had no waste and no social hesitation. They scanned corners like hunting dogs. I tested the wind and caught the answer under dust, rainwater, and old smoke. Beef, heavy and hot. Not one meal by accident, but the same meal over and over until the body learned only one order. Zero fed them on purpose, I said when I came down. Lee stopped writing. May looked at the board. Old Juan folded his hands. Pak asked the right question. Can he point them at us? Not like soldiers, I said. Like dogs trained on one smell. The room got quieter after that. Everyone understood dogs. Everyone understood what it meant to be hunted by something still alive. We cut normal watch shifts and built scent shifts. Pak tracked routes. I marked wind channels. Dong hated that part. He wanted a weapon answer, something you could hold. This problem smelled first. The cost hit fast. 2 people off salvage duty meant less wood. Less wood meant less boiled water margin if the gas died. One tactical upgrade shaved 12% off our utility work that day. I wrote it anyway. Detection before contact. If we only saw attacks when they reached the shutters, we were already paying too much. Systems always look expensive before they save your life. By noon, the scouts had become 5. Same beef line, same broken rhythm, half feral and half directed. One stopped under our wall and pressed its nose to the metal like it expected a command scent. Pack whispered, "If they know the building now, they can draw others here." I nodded. That was the next layer. Not just being found, being marked. Once marked, every noise became an invitation. We spent 2 liters of oil moving the outer cans and glass into a narrower funnel on the west lane. Tan cursed the waste. I agreed with him and made him help anyway. Better to waste oil than blood. Lee asked for 1 hour with each team member and tightened the food log after the invoice. She found 2 people already stress eating from hidden snack packs. I confiscated both without speeches. Nobody liked that. Good. Rules that matter should cost comfort. I told them the truth. Hidden food is hidden mutation. If you eat alone, you gamble with everyone else in this building. Near dusk, Pak came up the stairs 2 at a time. "Movement west," he said. "Not 5. More." I took the roof, dropped flat, and counted through the gap in the billboard frame. 23 total. Not a clean herd. 14 dead, 9 living. The dead moved straight. The living cut, paused, tested, then copied whatever line looked safest. Mixed groups were harder than either type alone. The zombie side carried cheap noodle weakness from the east and beef mass from the west. The living side all carried the same hot animal smell. 0 had mixed stupidity with initiative on purpose. I came down already dividing lanes. First line, cans, wire, noise. Second line, oil and stagger boards. Third line, interior kill zone at the loading hall. Numbers beat fear if you say them aloud. Head count for defense was 7 fit fighters, 3 support hands, 1 medic, 1 strategist, 1 child room locked. I assigned Dong West choke, Pack high relay, May stock seal, Lee rear treatment. Old Juan did not argue when I put him off the front. He took message duty instead and became worth 2 fighters just by keeping panic from spreading faster than instructions. Calm as a force multiplier. I kept Hawk sight active until my eyes felt sanded from inside. Long-range edges sharpened. Movement broke into readable lines. The downside was tunnel fatigue. Too many fast targets and depth warped. The first wave hit the cans at full speed and gave me the answer I needed. The dead went where noise pulled them. The ferals stopped half a second, sniffed, then chose the cleaner lane to the side. "They learn by smell," I called down. "Not smart, but not blind." Pak repeated it from the stairs. Dong shifted his position 3 meters right before the second contact, and that saved his leg. The oil line took the front 4 dead immediately. They slipped, slammed, and jammed the funnel. For 7 seconds, the path closed. Then a living feral used a body like a step and cleared the pile. That changed the whole equation. I dropped from roof relay and went to second line because observation had become reaction. Dog scent marked 3 more coming left through the service alley garbage. I met the first one at a shelf brace Tan had bolted into the wall that morning. It lunged high. I went low, used pythonless flexibility I did not yet have, and paid for it with a bruise on my spine. The knife went in under the jaw hinge where the human shape still betrayed the animal instinct. Living tissue bleeds, dead tissue stalls. I had learned to tell the difference by resistance alone. Dong took the second feral with a pipe shot to the knee and looked surprised by his own timing. Good. Surprise means learning. He shouted for oil. May sent half a bottle and not a drop more. Every resource in a raid has a second enemy, overuse. We spent 3 liters in 19 minutes. At that pace, we would lose our fire margin in 1 more serious night. I started counting throws aloud. Pack worked from the half stair with bricks and target calls. He was not stronger than the others. He was faster at seeing where pressure would become collapse. That made him expensive in the best way. The dead reached third line first because they feared nothing. The ferals reached it second because they tested everything. In a straight sprint, the dead win. In a city with angles, the living are worse. A heavy beef dead broke the side brace with 1 shoulder and opened a gap wide enough for panic. I hit it from the flank, not to kill, but to turn mass into blockage. Weight can defend if you place it. Tan and Dong slammed the panel shut behind the falling body while Pak kicked wedge blocks under the frame. We lost 1 brace, 1 panel, and almost 1 hand. The hand stayed. The panel did not. The last 5 broke when the mixed rhythm failed. Dead without living guidance walked into the oil patch twice. Ferals without dead cover started valuing pain again and chose retreat over entry. We did not chase. Chasing after a defense win is how you trade a clean result for a funeral. I held the line until the sound map settled and the dog scent thinned past 30 meters in both lanes. After the raid, I ran numbers before anyone got heroic. Barricade West section damaged beyond patch. Oil down 30%. 2 minor cuts, 1 shoulder strain, 0 dead. That was the real victory. Then Lee added the line that mattered most. The living ones were coordinated by diet, not loyalty. Old Juan repeated it slower, meaning this can be reproduced. That made the whole room colder. At dawn, we held council over weak tea and exact numbers. Food 10 days, water 8, oil 11 liters, morale unstable, external pressure rising. We could wait or cut the scouting network ourselves. I chose a third option. If Zero was using beef ferals as guided pressure, then I wanted to know whether a stronger smell could pull them away from our lanes. Lure beats collision when mass favors him. The nearest source was the old meat market 6 blocks west. Half the coolers were spoiled, but spoiled was enough. We did not need edible. We needed irresistible. That made the mission disgusting, not hard. Dong volunteered before I asked. That told me the raid had changed something. I know how to carry weight and run under it, he said. Pak rolled his eyes. You know how to be loud under it. The plan was simple on paper and ugly in execution. We haul rotten meat to the tram junction, split it into 2 scent lanes, then break line east so the herd follows dinner instead of our stock floor. Cost list first, 2 hooks, 1 cart, 3 cloth masks, 1 liter oil for emergency burn, 40 minutes exposure inside a high-risk zone. Reward, if it worked, fewer patrols and weaker pressure arcs. May packed the masks and looked at me too long while I checked knives. Bring Dong back the same shape he left, she said. I answered with the only promise available. I'll bring back what I can. The market was a wet ruin of steel shutters and snapped tile. Dog scent hit before sight did. Blood old and new. Fish, pork, beef, bleach, mold. A whole city of bad choices rotting in one building. Pat climbed first and gave us entry through a loading gap above eye level. Inside, the cold room doors hung open. The smell punched through cloth and settled behind my eyes like a metal taste. We found enough ruined beef in 8 minutes to start a riot among the ferals. Dong loaded the cart in silence after 1 gag reflex and 1 glare from me. Survival gets easier after the second shame. Then we heard movement on the drain side. Not dead. Too careful. Pak tapped twice from the shelf rack. 3 scouts. Same beef line as before. Zero had already started covering resource zones. I changed the plan without debate. We left the cart visible and carried only the prime bait sacks by hand. Let them think they had found our objective. Greed is a leash if you know when to drop it. Dong took the left corridor and made noise on purpose, pipe against steel, boots against loose trays. The scouts followed him exactly as expected. Pak and I cut above the freezer row with the meat. At Junction 1, I tore open the first sack and dragged it across the rail median. The smell spread so hard, even I wanted to move toward it. Dog nose is useful. It is also a punishment sometimes. Pak threw the second sack into the tram shell and cracked the side window. Air pulled through. Scent lane established. The first scout arrived, stopped, twitched, then abandoned Dong entirely for meat. That told us enough. Directed pressure was still pressure, but instinct could override assignment if the stimulus was hot enough. Zero did not own them completely. He rented them through appetite. We widened the trail block by block, meat scrap by meat scrap, all the way to the flooded underpass west of our building. That underpass already held dead from a bus pileup. Perfect collision point. The herd reached the turn faster than I liked. More than scouts now. At least 15, maybe 18, mixing dead and living. Pot cursed once, low and precise. Dong finally stopped making fake noise. Run line B, I said. We crossed the divider and cut through the pharmacy yard. 1 feral broke off, too close, too fast. Dong turned to block, took the claw across his forearm, and kept moving. I killed the attacker on the second step because the first was angle correction. Knife up through the pallet, twist, drop. Dong did not thank me. Good. Thank yous during exits waste oxygen and focus. We reached the burn point and spent the oil only when the front rank entered the underpass mouth. Fire was not the kill. Fire was the door slam. Heat, smoke, panic, dead bodies, no clean path back. The herd broke where I wanted. Roughly 80% drove into the flooded lane and the bus choke beyond it. The rest scattered by instinct, scattering beats marching if the march was toward my home. Back at base, Lee cleaned Dong's arm and delivered the numbers without mercy. 4 claws, no deep muscle. High contamination risk because attacker was living. We isolate 12 hours and monitor behavior. Dong did not argue about isolation. That mattered more than the wound. He looked at me while Lee wrapped him and said, "You were right. Smell moved them faster than fear. That was our first shared truth. I answered in the only useful way. Then next time you trust the ugly plan sooner. He grunted, which from Dong counted as full diplomatic progress. Pak called it romance and got a spoon thrown at him. We needed another edge, not for brawling, but for detection and clutter. Hawksight gave me range. Dog scent gave me broad warning. What I lacked was interior reading, walls, dark corners, warm bodies. Lee said the answer before I did. Snake. Pak hated it on principle. May hated it for reasons she did not explain. Dong, from isolation, just asked, what kind? I said the one that solved the map. The pet shop sat 800 meters northeast under a collapsed sign. We had skipped it twice because cages make noise and noise makes variables. Now variables were already living outside our doors. Mission cost looked ugly. 2 fit operators if Dong stayed isolated. 1 child watchkeeper removed from stock duty. 45 minutes there and back. Reward uncertain. Risk of exotic ferals high. I went anyway with Pak because waiting for clean odds is how small groups die politely. The shop windows were webbed with cracks but mostly intact. Inside smelled of seed, fur, old water, and stress. We found dead birds first, then empty rodent tanks, then 1 live python coiled under a heat lamp still running on a battery pack someone had rigged from a hobby inverter. Luck, finally, wearing scales. I killed it fast, not because I respected it, because I respected what delay does to courage. Eating it was worse than pigeon, worse than anything so far. Dense flesh, clean muscle, cold taste, no mercy. The system hit like ice poured down my spine. Python assimilated, thermal detection acquired, chemoreceptive tongue response acquired, axial flexibility increased, low-light motion parsing improved. Then the cost line, Boar slot displaced. I felt the change happen before the words finished. Forearm plates softened, leg drive lightened, my neck loosened, power fell, sensory range expanded. My tongue stung at the tip, then split by a degree so small I only noticed when I swallowed. A faint scale pattern darkened the side of my neck. Pak looked once, then looked at the floor instead. Useful? He asked. I opened the backroom door and pointed through 2 walls. There's something warm behind the register and 2 warmer shapes in the office crawl space. Pak checked. I was right. On the way back, I tested heat sight and pulses the way I used Hawk Focus. It did not replace vision. It layered over it. Warm pipes glowed, hiding places breathed, and every person became a moving ember. Back inside, May saw the new pattern on my neck before anyone else. She waited until evening inventory was over, then cornered me near the sink line where steam blurred the room for everyone but me. People are starting to fear you more than the things outside, she said. No drama, no accusation, just a shelf report on social weather. That made it worse. Facts are harder to reject than emotion. Do they fear me? I asked. Or what I remind them can happen to them? May did not blink. Both. And both can break a base if you pretend they are the same problem. She was right. I hated that. Pak adapted first because Pak adapts to whatever lets him keep moving. He started asking practical questions about heat bloom through doors and body count through walls. Use is the fastest road to trust. Dong was still in isolation when 2 survivors from the North Service Road reached us at dawn. 11 total behind them, they said, scattered in pairs. The rest of Zhang's group had not made it. I put them in intake and listened before I offered water. Both talked like men who had learned obedience from hunger. Zero had taken them in, fed them by rule, and sorted them by what they swallowed. What rule? Old Juan asked. The older survivor answered without looking up. 1 food per person. No changes, no private eating. Refusal means no ration. Second refusal means out the gate with 1 day. That was not rationing. That was sculpting. Lee knew it too. I could see her rewriting half her notes in her head. When the younger man said Zhang died first, nobody in the room moved for 3 breaths. How? May asked. The answer was quiet. He kept arguing, kept stealing from other trays, kept saying a guard should eat what he chose. Zero smiled and gave him beef 3 days straight, then opened the gate. I could see the rest without hearing it. Heavy body, slower mind, stronger hunger, less patience, then outside pressure and no team. Zero had not killed him directly. He had written his ending through diet. I said it aloud because someone had to. He turned transformation into a weapon of government. Old Juan closed his eyes once. Pak muttered, "A kingdom built out of menus." That was close enough. The news hardened our schedule. No more assuming time. No more assuming distance protected us. If Zero had broken Zhang, he would come for us next, either to absorb us, scare us, or make an example. The inside crisis arrived before the outside one could. The fishman we had isolated months ago started banging at noon with a different rhythm than panic. Too regular, too forceful, too sure of his body. Lee opened the panel slot and went still. His eyes are worse, she said. Pupils wider, skin slick again. That should not have happened under rice, beans, and water. Regression had been slow, but real. I smelled the answer before we searched the room. Fish oil under the blankets, salt in the vent grate. He had found one hidden stack of canned mackerel we missed when we first sealed the storage crack. One secret stash. One patient lying to the logs. One more proof that appetite does not need evil to become dangerous. It only needs access and 1 hour without supervision. Systems fail in the blind spots. We moved to restrain, but he broke before the straps touched him. Not dead, not gone, but no longer governed by conversation. He hit the wall, rebounded low, and drove straight at Lee instead of the exit. Fish instinct is not wolf violence. It is surge, body force, blind forward pressure. He slammed her into the cot frame hard enough to crack wood. I got there on heat sight before normal vision caught up. I did not kill him because he was still ours, still breathing, still partly present behind the eyes. I caught the arm, turned with the momentum, and used the floor bucket he kicked as the slip point. He crashed shoulder first, came up again, and I wrapped him from the back before the next charge. Python flexibility mattered there more than boar armor ever would have. Control beat strength by timing. Pak got the restraint line around his legs. May shut the outer door. Lee, bruised and furious, kept enough discipline to hand me the sedative kit instead of reaching for revenge. That saved all of us. When he finally stopped thrashing, the room smelled like brine, fear, disinfectant, and failure. Nobody spoke for a while. Then Lee touched the bruise forming under her collarbone and asked the hard thing. What do we do with people who can't control themselves anymore? The question split the room cleaner than any knife, not because there were many answers, because every answer cost a different part of us. Dong, released from isolation an hour earlier, said, if he turns in the middle of a breach, he kills us. May answered, if we start killing the slipping ones early, we stop being a place worth saving. Old Juan did not rescue me from the choice. Good. Leaders who get rescued by old wisdom start believing hesitation is depth. I looked at the restraint marks on the man's wrists and chose the hardest lane. We separate categories, I said. Dead are dead. Ferals with no return signs or threat class. Living with pattern response stay under treatment. We judge by control markers, not fear. Lee added structure immediately, which is why she mattered. Speech retention. Eye tracking. Food compliance. Trigger response. Recovery after stimulus removal. We turned ethics into a protocol to keep it honest. Not everyone like that either, but anger is easier to survive than vagueness. By nightfall, we had a written chart on the wall. Mercy with thresholds, safety with evidence, humanity with ugly paperwork. 0 escalated before the ink dried. 10 armed men at the south lane. Not hiding, not scouting, not feral. Uniform enough and food to move like one unit, human enough to carry rifles and wait for effect. They did not shout first. They took positions where our windows could see them and let the shape of the threat speak. Then one called up, calm as a tax collector. Return the runaways, 0 is generous once. I went down alone because too many altered faces at the shutter would tell the wrong story. Halfway there, old Juan stepped beside me in his plain clothes and neutral diet body and did not ask permission. At the slit, I let them see exactly 2 figures. Me with the dark neck scales, hard joints, and eyes that caught too much light. Juan beside me almost entirely human, steady as a school teacher at a board. The spokesman took a second look at Juan and understood the contrast immediately. Good. I wanted him carrying that image back north. Control beside alteration. Choice beside discipline, not just one beast. These people chose to stay, I said. Before he answered, Juan said, and they choose what enters their mouths. He spoke softly. Somehow that landed harder than any threat I could have made. The rifles did not raise, but the paws sharpened. Another man on their line stared at my neck pattern, then at Juan's hands, then back at our walls. They were measuring not just force, but doctrine. The spokesman smiled without warmth. 0 feeds the city toward stability. You feed confusion. Juan folded his hands. No, he feeds obedience. We are trying something harder. That answer cost silence. They left in order, which I hated more than if they had cursed. Order means capacity. Capacity means they will be back with numbers, not feelings. Pak watched from above and summed it up in one line. So that's war then. I looked at the board when I climbed back to the stock floor. Food 9 days, water 7.5, oil 11, 9 armed outside, 1 sliding inside. And now, no more maybe. I spent the first hour after dawn turning fear into numbers. Zero had 60 to 70 armed followers, around 40 driven ferals, and enough food power to force obedience across 3 northern blocks. By raw force, he sat somewhere between 800 and 1,000. I was around 420 on my best day. In a straight fight, that gap was not courage, it was a grave. Our side looked cleaner on paper than it felt in the room. 26 people, food for 18 days, water for 12, 9 fighters. Only 6 people could control their diets under pressure. That 6 mattered more than the other 20. Me, Pak, Dung, Old Tan, Sister Lee, and Old Wang knew what we were eating, why we were eating it, and what instincts we could still stop. I drew the district on cardboard with a grease pencil. North was 0. West held meat packs and ruined loading docks. East meant flour storage and rooftop pigeons. South held apartments and bad memory. Then May opened a rice bin and went still. She pinched the grains, smelled them, and called my name once. The sound of it told me this was not spoilage. It was clear sabotage. The rice was dusted with pale powder so fine it hid between cracked grains. Fish smell sat under it, almost nothing. Not poison. Worse, a trigger. Ground bone from a fish-formed dead thing. Sister Lee checked 3 more sacks and found the same powder in all of them. Whoever did it knew our system well enough to poison diet discipline instead of bodies. That meant planning, not panic. We counted untouched stock and did the ugly subtraction. The contaminated bins had to go. Once we dumped them, real food dropped from 18 days to 3. 26 mouths. 2 days until contact. People heard the word sabotage and went loud fast. Questions first, then blame, then fear. Old Wang did not raise his voice. He just said, count before anger. Anger cannot be boiled for dinner. Sister Lee pulled 7 people aside before breakfast. Their pupils tracked wrong. Their lips stayed wet. Their reactions were late unless they heard water. Fish pull had already started during the night. The timing fit. They ate from the common rice after watch change. Not much, just enough. In this city, enough was never a flavor issue. Enough was the distance between reason and reflex. May wanted names. Pak wanted the traitor's face. Dung wanted to lock everyone down and search pockets. I wanted the next 48 hours intact. Revenge could wait. The body count could not. We searched anyway, but with a clock. Storage, bunks, stairwells, wash area, roof garden, dead corners behind the freezer line. No intruder. No second cache. No obvious confession waiting to be found. One of the 8 newcomers from last week was missing. Quiet man, narrow shoulders, called himself Jay. He had worked hard, talked little, and never once asked what went into the meal ledger. That silence looked different now. He had watched the ledger, learned the schedule, powdered the food, and walked out before dawn. Zero had not sent a knife. He had sent appetite through our own bins. The room wanted a clean answer, but I only had bad options. Option 1, fast the whole group and hope the fish pull weakened before our bodies did. Weak humans lose fights before they start. Option 2, let everyone eat whatever they found and accept random traits before battle. That gave short strength and long chaos. Random instinct in a defense line was just another hole in the wall. Option 3, send a raid east for flour and live birds, build controlled meals, and come back before Zero tightened his patrol ring. It was the only move with upside. It was also exposed. I laid the math out loud so nobody could pretend leadership meant luck. 3 days of clean food if the raid failed. 4 extra if we succeeded. 7 compromised already. Attack window, 48 hours. Old Wang nodded first. He liked decisions that showed their teeth openly. Dung hated the plan, but hated the other 2 more. Pak was already reaching for his route map before I finished speaking. Sister Lee asked the question the room was avoiding. What do we feed the 7 if we return with flour and birds? I answered before fear could get poetic. Small portions, strict rotation, watching. 2 of the 7 were worse by noon. Their eyes followed the water drums instead of faces. One scraped at the floor with his nails when he heard the cleaning bucket. Both could still answer their names. Sister Lee isolated all 7 behind the pharmacy gate on the 2nd floor. No cans, no shared stock, no loose tools. Measured water, dry bread only from untouched flour. Observation every 30 minutes. Dung called it soft. I told him it was expensive. If we killed everyone who slipped, we were not building a society. We were building a cleaner version of Zero with worse manners. Pak and I left before full light. The east route ran through laundry alleys, over a collapsed bus stop, then across a printing yard full of rain barrels and half-burned cardboard pallets. I kept dog scent active for patrol drift, hawk sight for long lanes, and crocodile weight off for speed. The kinks of switching forms under strain were starting to cost me less now. Zero's scouts had changed patterns since the last week. No straight loops, no lazy corners. They moved in pairs, paused at smells, and checked roofs after ground level. He was learning from every failure. Pac tapped my wrist twice at the first intersection. 2 warm bodies ahead. I dropped low behind a vending machine shell and checked shadows under a truck. Boots, not claws, human enough to think. We waited through 20 slow breaths. One scout spat, the other scratched his neck, then both moved on north. Their gait was too stiff for free men, beef heavy. Controlled or nearly gone, hard to tell. The east warehouse still stood behind a chain fence, bent inward by old crowd pressure. Flour bags had burst near the dock, but the back room had sealed pallets wrapped in plastic and still dry. Pac looked at the stacks and grinned the way only hungry people can. I checked the roof ladder first. Pigeons nested above the loading awning. Live protein, controllable traits, no random instincts attached. We split by timing, not distance. He hauled sacks to the door in 3 trips while I climbed for birds. The first 2 I caught with apron cloth and corner pressure. The third took blood. Pac tried to shoulder 40 kilos on the first carry and nearly folded backward. I cut the load into 2 bags, then made him leave 1 crate of bottled sauce behind. Flavor was not logistics. Halfway back, my nose picked up metal oil and old soap under the wind. Scout, not ahead. Angling in from our rear left, using the drain line for cover and the burnt van as screen. I shoved Pac forward with the lighter bag and took the side lane alone. The scout came in fast with a short hammer and a butcher glove on his left hand. Human choices, feral speed. He smelled of beef and sleep loss. Zero had fed this one for force, not stealth. Good. Force is easier to read. He swung high first. I saw the shoulder load before the arm moved. Hawksight tracked both wrists, but speed alone would not win in a corridor that narrow. I let him think he had pressure, backed over broken tile, and made him commit into bad footing. He clipped my ribs anyway. Sharp pain. Old bruise waking up. I answered low with the crowbar I'd taken from the warehouse door, not at his head but at his knee. Cheap targets save lives. The knee bent wrong. He stumbled, still dangerous, still trying to rise. I hit the wall alarm box with the crowbar and let the sudden scream of metal fill the lane. Noise was my second weapon. 2 dead things turned into the side street from somewhere behind him. Fish smell and wet cloth. Not my problem if they chose him first. I ran before the scene decided to become heroic. Pac was 40 meters ahead, dragging flour like he hated every ancestor that made grain heavy. I grabbed the rear bag, pushed us through a hardware gap, and used dog scent to avoid the next patrol line. We made it home with 2 flour sacks, 1 smaller bag of dry beans, and 6 live pigeons in a tied laundry basket that looked insulted by its new purpose. It was enough. Barely. New count. Food for 4 days if we stretched everything hard. Not comfort, not safety, just room to choose. In this city, room to choose was worth more than full shelves you could not trust. I let people watch while I sorted the first emergency meal. Clean flour porridge, bean mash, tiny measured bird portions only for those we needed mobile and clear. No one touched anything without a ledger mark. Sister Lee tracked the poisoned 7 every 2 hours. By evening, 2 had slid further. Speech remained, but focus did not. Their hands flexed at plumbing in the wall. Their mouths dried between words. They still knew me. That hurt more than if they had gone full mindless. One asked whether he would be useful tomorrow. I told him not tomorrow. The truth was, maybe not ever. I hated that truth. Real combat count dropped from 9 to 7. Dung could still hold a line, but his bandaged arm cut his reach. Old Tan could work a hammer and a saw, yet every swing cost him through the bite wound. By dusk, we had a second problem. Zero's patrol ring tightened enough that east runs would soon close. Whatever happened next had to use the map we already had, not the one we wished for. That was when Dung brought news from a defector we had been feeding near the boiler room. Zero kept a live crocodile in a cage below the north loading court. He called it his last lesson. I asked the source the only thing that mattered. Alive? He nodded. Fed? Another nod. Zero had been keeping it for months, which meant size, stability, and a trait package worth killing for. Pac saw my face and swore before I said anything. Sister Lee said no at once. May said no quieter, which somehow weighed more. Old Wang only asked what we gained that justified the risk. I answered with numbers, because numbers insult emotion less than certainty. I could not beat Zero head-on at my current set. Dog gave scent. Hawk gave tracking. I still needed a body that could absorb him. Crocodile meant armor on the torso, crushing leverage, low center stability, and maybe water control if the fight got dragged near the flooded lanes. It also meant another night raid under a closing ring. Dung said he was going. I told him his arm made him a liability. He held my stare for 3 seconds, then asked if I wanted the truth or obedience. I said both would be ideal. He went anyway. Sometimes leadership is not stopping the reckless man. It is making sure the reckless man carries the quieter tool and the correct exit route. I gave him a bolt cutter and shut up. We moved after midnight. 3 people, no lantern, dark clothes, no meat in our pockets, no metal that clinked. Pak led the surface route. I handled scent. Dung carried the cutter in his temper. The north loading court sat under a half-collapsed supermarket wing. Zero's people used the upper floors for storage and the lower ramp for punishment. Even empty, the place smelled like enforced hunger. We found the cage below the freight platform, chained to a support column wrapped in old freezer cable. The animal inside was longer than a small car and too still to be mistaken for weak. It watched without panic. Good predators do not waste movement. I counted jaw reach through the bars, checked hinge rust, then measured room. Fighting it loose was suicide. Killing through the cage was work. Dung set the cutter to the side chain, not to free it, but to angle the cage enough that the beast pushed forward for space. Pak fed a hook line through the bars to pull the snout. The crocodile exploded when the chain shifted. The force shook dust off the beam overhead. Teeth hit steel with a crack that went through my legs. Pak nearly lost the line and one hand with it. I jammed the pry bar through the side gap just behind the jaw angle while Dung used the second bar low against the throat. We were not stronger. We just had 3 points and one plan. The animal twisted hard enough to wrench my shoulder half loose. I kept the bar down, Dung leaned with his whole weight, and Pak looped the line again across the snout and pulled backward to fix the angle. It took too long. Everything loud takes too long when you know other people might be counting sound. At last, the beast jammed wrong against the bars, neck exposed for one ugly, narrow working line. I used the long butcher spike we had taken off a restaurant display stand. Not a heroic weapon, just hardened steel with a good point. One thrust into the soft line behind the jaw. Then again. Blood hit my hands warm and thick. The tail slammed the cage so hard the chain anchor cracked concrete. Dung nearly lost his footing. Pak swore non-stop in short bursts, which helped more than prayer. When the movement finally slowed, the whole room smelled like iron, old water, and expensive risk. We waited another full minute because impatience kills as reliably as any predator with teeth. The system only triggered after I cut and swallowed. It never cared about dignity. Crocodile assimilated, torso plating up, blunt resistance up, jaw compression reflex increased. Buoyancy shift detected. Pain rolled over my chest and back like a heated press. Skin tightened, then thickened in ridges under the shirt. My ribs felt wrapped in damp boards. Every breath got heavier before it got stronger. I dropped Python at once. Too much overlap, too much strain, and I needed the slot clean. Current set, dog for warning, hawk for tracking, crocodile for impact survival. Ugly, but battle practical. Dung watched the whole change without flinching this time. His face did not soften, but something in it stopped resisting the fact that I was using the body like a tool because the world forced that. When I finished breathing through the worst of it, he said only one thing. Hold together. Not orders, not fear, not disgust. Just a man admitting he needed the monster to stay a man one more day. We got out before the first Northern Patrol reached the lower ramp. Pak heard them first. I smelled tallow and wet rope second. We left the carcass, took one scale plate loose, and disappeared through drainage. Back at base, Sister Lee checked the new plating with 2 fingers and an expression halfway between doctor and mechanic. Pain? She asked. Enough, I said. Function? I answered that by taking a hammer tap. Before dawn, the missing newcomer problem solved itself badly. Pak found Jay's folded jacket near the west duct and a signal mark cut into the wall in fishbone paste. He had been ours only on paper. Dung wanted to hunt him immediately. I said no. One informer already bought Zero a poisoned pantry. Chasing a gone man on the eve of battle only bought him a second success for free. He rounded on me then. You use that defector too. You keep people close until they become information. You don't get to act cleaner than Zero because your ledger handwriting is better. I let him spend it all because some anger has to finish cooking before it can be handled. Then I answered the only part worth answering. I used information. If I'm wrong, I die first. He stared long enough that Pak checked both of us like he expected a fight. Then Dung looked at my chest plating through the shirt and nodded once. Fine. Then die in front if it goes bad. Old Tan finished the outer funnel with one hand in bad temper. Every board he nailed in place narrowed the approach to the front lane and bought us more value from oil, spikes, and falling debris. May and Sister Lee turned the kitchen into a war kitchen, not a family one. Measured dough rounds, bean paste by weight, water by mark, no improvisation, no comfort cooking, no wasted heat. By sunset, our final count stood like a judge. 26 people total, 7 controlled enough to fight, 7 slipping under watch, 4 support only, 8 civilians who could carry, patch, boil, and pray. Food after the raid and ration cut, 4 days. Water, 11. Oil for the front lane, 60% of what I wanted. Nails enough, wood enough. Sleep nowhere near enough for anyone worth counting. I checked the routes one last time with Pak. Route A fed the main push into the kill lane. Route B redirected overflow toward the old Japanese restaurant block where Marine dead still pooled in numbers. If Zero stayed stupid, the Sea dead would eat his front rank for us. If he stayed smart, he would cut the route and push direct. We prepared for both, which meant neither plan felt complete. After dark, May found me at the roof edge while I was checking line of sight over the burned pharmacy sign. She did not start with fear. She started with the future, which is worse. "After this, where do we go?" she asked. I told her the east, where the streets opened wider and the rooftops linked cleaner. A place to build properly, not just survive loudly for another week. She stood beside me a while before speaking again. "You're changing more on the outside." She touched the raised line under my collar where scale met skin and then took her hand back. I looked at my own hands. Darkened nails, knuckles harder now, new weight in my torso, new drag in the shoulders. I said the only thing I could still promise honestly. "Inside, not yet." May nodded, but not because she fully believed me. "That is the part that matters," she said. In the silence after that, I could hear someone below crying without trying to be heard. Old Wang had come up halfway through and stayed by the stair door like a man who respected private grief but distrusted private timing before war. He pretended to watch the West while listening to us. Tomorrow is about proving your system can hold when hunger, fear, and instinct all pull at once. If it holds, people will follow choice. If it fails, they will follow force because force is simpler. I asked him which he thought I was becoming. He surprised me by answering fast. "A cook still. Only now the meal is a society and you finally know exactly what can poison it." I did not sleep after that. I checked the front lane, the side doors, the water drums, the pharmacy gate, the watch list, the roof basket of pigeons, and the map until dawn thinned the sky. At first light, the base smelled of flour, lamp oil, fear, and wet bandages. Good. Real smells. Manageable smells. Somewhere north of us, Zero was waking hungry. Somewhere inside us, so were our instincts. Attack came 6 hours early. Dawn had barely thinned the roofs when Pak hissed from the south stair. I was still counting oil jars when the first iron hit our outer shutters and the whole base woke wrong. Not 10 minutes later, I had the count. 58 armed behind the push, 40 wild ones in front. Zero had put the living without control, where arrows, spikes, and fear would hit first. That told me enough. Tan had not finished the last barricade section. 12 meters of lane still had only one layer and loose nails. We had built for noon pressure. Zero came at dawn and turned time itself into his first weapon. I moved everyone by function, not emotion. 7 fighters to their posts, 4 support to water, bolts, and bandages. Civilians to the rear kitchen, Sister Lee to triage, May to ration lock and inner doors. Food no longer mattered for the next 2 hours. Oil, angles, and stamina mattered. I put Pak on the roof mouth with stones and signal calls. Dung took the front with 7 people and one simple rule. Do not chase. Let the lane work first. He nodded once. He had stopped arguing last night because numbers had beaten pride. 7 against 28 made ego a stupid expense. The first wilds hit before we finished the brief. They did not roar like movie monsters. They came breathing hard, shoes slapping oil, nails scraping metal, bodies still living enough to hate the cold of dawn. Oil took the first 4 down exactly as planned. They slid under the wire, tangled, and let our spears do clean work. Then the 5th wild watched the fall, shifted weight, and jumped from dry tile to dry tile. That was the difference. Dead things repeated failure. Wild things corrected inside instinct. Not strategy, not thought, just body adjustment. My perfect lane failed by the 6th body and became a live problem. I ordered more oil on the center, not the edges. If they found the side grip, they would flank the spike line in seconds. May's runners rolled jars forward while bolts from above slowed the tighter pack. A man with rabbit teeth and butcher arms hit the left rail hard enough to shake nails loose. Dung smashed his fingers one by one with a hammerhead tied to pipe. Ugly work, effective work, necessary. We dropped 3 more wilds with fish hooks rigged to hanging wire. One tore his own cheek open trying to rip free. Another chewed the cord itself because the last thing in him was still hunger before fear. Behind them, the armed line kept steady pressure. They were not charging blind. They were herding the wilds into our costs, forcing us to burn oil, bolts, and attention before the real assault began. I smelled beef before I saw the second rank move. Zero's cattle-fed scouts were there, heavy and patient, each waiting for a clean opening through the living shield he had built out of broken people's bodies. Pack whistled twice from the roof. Right flank movement. Through hawk sight, I caught 3 climbers on drainpipe brackets. Wild, but not empty. They moved like cats, trained by panic, not thought. I cut them off by route, not by speed. There was no time to reach the roof edge, so I kicked loose our brick cache. 20 kilos of broken masonry dropped through the blind angle and broke 2 hands. The third climber kept coming with one arm hanging wrong. That was when I understood the front wave. Pain no longer negotiated with them. Only leverage, traps, and total damage still worked. Pac finished that one with a pry bar through the chin. He did not celebrate. He just looked at me, then at the next roofs, and shouted, "They keep adapting. Lane buys minutes, not the fight." He was right. Our first phase had been built to punish momentum. Wilds were not momentum. They were fragments of people running on food memory, fear, and whatever smell Zero used to keep them pointed forward. I switched us to break rhythm. Short volleys, then silence. Empty edge left, hard pressure right. Pull them off symmetry. Even mindless creatures fall into movement habits, and habits can be farmed. That bought enough space to trigger Route B. I sent the flare into the old transit alley. Tan had wired the leaning signs there with line and debris. One pull collapsed the path on schedule. The debris did not kill many. It redirected them. That was enough. The collapsing signs forced the side mass toward the Japanese restaurant block, where 200 Marine dead had waited for days. The first contact was almost beautiful in a kitchen way. Wrong ingredients, right timing. Salt stink from the sea dead hit the warm blood smell of Zero's flank, and the street changed owners. Marine dead poured out of shattered doors and flooded the side lane in a blue-gray wave of shells, slick skin, and jaw clicks. For one breath, the enemy line forgot us and stared at its own bill. Panic started where I wanted it. 3 of Zero's armed men fired too early, hit wilds, and jammed the route. Pac laughed once over the roofline and then went back to counting targets like a clerk. If Zero had been stupid, that would have ended it. But he halted the rear with one raised arm and did not waste the whole army to save the part I had thrown into the sea-dead grinder. He split on instinct faster than some generals think. 30 turned toward the Marine dead with poles, hooks, and loud meat packs. He sent them to drag the sea-dead aside, not kill them, just open lanes. And with the other 28, he came straight for us through the pharmacy front, which had always been the shortest path if someone was willing to pay bodies for it. Zero was always willing to pay bodies. That was the moment the fight became real. The sea-dead chaos still helped, but only at the edge. At the base mouth, 28 armed bodies now pushed against 7 tired defenders and 1 half-built wall. Dung held the entry like a man trying to repay 6 arguments at once. He rotated people by shoulder strength, not rank. 2 stabbers forward, 1 hook pull, 1 hammer drop, then switch before arms failed. I fed him information from above. 3 left had butcher masks and short spears. 2 center had shields cut from freezer doors. 1 rear man signaled with strips of red cloth. Leader chain, not rabble. We burned our last reserved oil on the shield pair and lit it late after they stepped in. Fire took the cloth edge, not the metal, but that was enough to make them open angle and lose their push. Pac dropped a shelf brace from the second floor into the gap. It crushed 1 knee and bought 6 seconds. 6 seconds is not poetry in a siege. 6 seconds is 1 reload, 1 breath, 1 life. Then the inner problem broke loose. Sister Lee screamed from isolation. The 2 fish-marked men had snapped the warped latch under the noise and blood stink of the front fight and come out hard. For 1 ugly heartbeat, I thought we were done. 2 half-controlled bodies were loose inside while the outer line bent. But instinct did what planning could not. They charged the wrong targets. They hit Zero's front men from the side with all the blunt force of dock workers and all the sense of a feeding frenzy. No orders, no loyalty, just motion toward chaos and foreign scent. Good enough. 1 invader lost half an ear before he saw them. Another went down under a tackle so violent it cracked tile. Dung used the confusion perfectly and drove the line forward 3 steps. That 3-step gain saved the base. It let us slam the pharmacy gate half shut and turn a flood into a choke. If the fish-changed pair had gone for us instead, this part ends with a funeral count. I filed that lesson away even while fighting. Wild impulse is not the same as fixed allegiance. If shaped by smell, pressure, and lanes, it can still collide with a stronger enemy before it collides with you. Then Zero entered my sightline and every smaller equation became background noise. He needed no introduction. The space around him already looked wrong, as if several animals had written orders into one body. He was larger than any human should be and less stable than any beast could survive. One arm longer than the other, plates over the ribs, feathers under torn skin, a jaw that closed a little out of time. When he smiled, one side of his face did not get the message. "Cook with 3 traits against me," he said. His voice carried, but I could hear slips in it, as if several throats wanted the same air. I stepped into the open lane, because if I let him hit the front mass first, Dung would lose people faster than we could count them. 3 I control, I told him. How many control you? He laughed, but the laugh broke halfway into a cough and a click. That was useful. If his body was arguing with itself under stress, I did not need to overpower him. I needed to make him overuse himself. My active set was simple and brutal. Dog for warning and scent. Hawk for tracking and angle. Crocodile for armor and clamp strength. No stealth, no elegance, just a tool rack built to survive something larger. He moved first and almost ended it there. My dog sense caught the shift before my eyes fully did, just enough for me to dip left. His fist still clipped my shoulder and spun me into the rail. Crocodile plates on my torso turned a chest-breaking blow into a rib-deep bruise. I tasted blood anyway. Good. Blood meant I still had a mouth, lungs, and enough time to keep thinking like a cook under heat. Zero came again with both hands this time, but Hawksight let me split his line. I tracked shoulder, elbow, hip, knee all at once, not faster than him, just earlier than a normal man could read. I never met him head-on. I gave him angle, let him commit weight, then stepped on the dry tiles I had memorized at dawn. He kept taking the direct path because his strongest parts trusted mass too much. Every clash cost me. My arms numbed from blocking, my spine rang from impacts. Crocodile armor protected, but armor is not immunity. It only buys damage in installments instead of one clean payment. He tried to corner me against the pharmacy frame. I ducked under a grab and smelled his trail hard for the first time. Bird oil, stale pond, old blood, wet fur, reptile musk. Too many kitchens in one pot. That smell profile mattered more than fear. It confirmed what I had suspected. He had stacked species past usability. Big power? Yes. But also sensory overlap, reflex conflict, and blind spots under strain. So I stopped thinking of him as a boss monster and started thinking of him as a ruined dish. Too many rich ingredients, too much heat, no discipline, all force and no balance. Still lethal, still breakable. I backed toward the central oil patch on purpose. He saw the retreat and grinned like he thought hunger had finally made me stupid. Good. Predators love the story they already want to believe about weaker prey. The first step onto the oil did not drop him. He was too heavy for a full slide and too practiced with his own instability. But it changed his footwork from attack to correction, and correction opened beats. I attacked only during correction. Low kick to support ankle. Palm to plated ribs where the armor met softer tissue. Hook to jaw hinge when one side closed later than the other. Small damage, expensive damage. Zero adjusted by widening his stance. Smart. Smarter than I liked. Then he came low, which meant he had noticed my habit of slipping under high force. He was learning from me even while his body betrayed him. The dog in me smelled the move before his muscles finished loading. I jumped back half a beat and his shoulder hit the pharmacy post hard enough to crack concrete veneer. If that had landed clean, I was done. He ripped the post edge free and swung the chunk like a club. I lost the rail, gave ground, and nearly hit the burned medicine shelves. Behind him, I could hear Dung shouting counts to hold the gate. I needed a read he did not know he was giving, so I looked not at the biggest features but at the mistakes. Torn feather buds under the ear, asymmetric eye focus, jaw lag, uneven knee armor. Then I saw it clearly with Hawksight. Behind his left ear, under scar tissue and dirty feather growth, sat a malformed avian node. Bird trait, badly integrated. Enough for sight bursts, enough for a flaw. In kitchens, bird tells matter. Upward scan good. Lateral snap good. Downward perception weaker unless the head angle clears. If zero layered bird vision on too many others, his lower blind arc might remain. I tested with a dropped bolt. I flicked it low to my right. His eyes did not track it until the second bounce. Not proof yet, but enough to wager pain on. I have cooked on worse odds than that. So I changed levels completely. High feint with the left, shoulder line obvious, then all the way down. Not crouch, collapse. I dropped under his expected sight channel and drove through his support side. He swung where my head had been and caught only air. I came in under the ribs, under the arm, under the eye line that trusted upper threat first. My hardened knuckles slammed his knee from below. Hawk reflex sharpened the line. Crocodile drive gave it weight. I did not punch the joint. I punched the gap where overloaded armor had made the hinge stiffer and therefore easier to break if struck off angle. I heard the crack before I felt my own wrist scream. Zero's leg folded wrong at the knee and his whole body dropped to one side, more from structural confusion than pure pain. Big things hate losing geometry. He roared, but even that was mixed now. Human anger, animal distress, a wet reptile hiss, and something almost bird-like in the upper note. He slashed at me from the floor and scored my thigh through cloth. I stumbled back bleeding and nearly fell into the oil myself. Pak shouted that the north split was collapsing. Dung shouted he could hold one more minute, maybe two. Time was back on the table. Zero tried to rise on the damaged leg and failed the first time. That told both sides enough. His people saw weakness. Ours smelled it. Momentum changed flavor so fast I could almost taste it. The fish-marked pair hit his rear rank again because the smell cloud had shifted. An injured alpha sends different signals. Wild things notice hierarchy fractures faster than loyal soldiers do. Dung pushed on that instant. Pipe hammers, shelf spears, hooks, one shield stolen mid-fight. Our front line lunged not to chase, but to widen the choke and make retreat cost more than attack had promised them. Zero looked around once and did the math exactly like a leader should. 30 of his men were still tied in the marine dead block. The 28 here were losing structure. The Wilds had lost direction. He could still maybe kill me. He could no longer win the district before his body and army both came apart. That was when intelligence saved him and doomed us to seeing him again instead of burying him now. He straightened as much as the knee allowed and stared at me with one eye focused and one eye hunting for something else. "You won the round, Cook," he said, "but look at what you are buying." I kept my guard high and said nothing. He smiled with the side of his mouth that still obeyed. "How many more meals before your people stop asking if you lead them or stalk them?" It landed deeper than fists. Then he withdrew with discipline I wish he had not possessed. 2 men threw smoke jars. 3 covered the leg. The rest backed in layers, taking whoever they could still save and leaving dead where they fell. I wanted to chase. Dog blood wanted throat. Hawk blood wanted the opening. The human part still counting totals measured my limp, the bleeding thigh, our broken gait, and the sea dead on Route B. So I let him go. Not from mercy, from math. A retreating, unstable monster with guards and smoke was worth less than securing a base with wounded people, open food stores, and 2 half-wild men still loose. The last organized push broke within 3 minutes of his exit. Men without Zero's scent and signals lost nerve fast. Some ran into the marine dead street. Some tried the roof and met Pak's bricks the hard way. By the time the noise thinned, the courtyard looked like a kitchen after an explosion. Oil, ash, blood, splintered wood, bent tools, dropped packs, smoke and bodies in too many half-human shapes. My hands shook only when there was time for them to. Sister Lee tied my thigh first, then made me sit while she checked for fractures. I refused twice before the room tilted enough to make refusal childish. Final count came in pieces because that is how bad mornings end. 3 dead on our side, not all fighters. 1 runner, 1 spear holder, 1 woman from support who burned when the shelf fire spread too fast. Tan's arm was broken at the forearm when a shield man got through the unfinished section. Clean break, filthy wound. He stayed conscious long enough to apologize for the barricade before passing out. The base had not survived intact. Front shutters gone. Pharmacy wall charred. 1 storage room flooded from burst drums. 40% of the trap lane was spent or broken. We had paid in structure and flesh. The 2 fish-marked men who had turned the defense by accident did not die. Once the smell storm ended and we locked them apart again, their breathing slowed and the frenzy drained out of their faces. Sister Lee watched them for an hour and then gave the sentence that mattered most after any body count. Without the external trigger, the instinct is receding. Not gone, not cured, but receding. Dung sat on an overturned crate, blood on his sleeve, and laughed once. "We held 28 with 7 and 2 accidents," he said. "That feels illegal." Pain had given him a sense of humor. I told him the accidents were now variables, and we would treat them as such. He looked at me a long moment, then nodded without the old resentment. War had finally translated my language for him. We searched the fallen before noon heat rose. Weapons first, then food, then medicines, then papers. Zero's people had come expecting to feed off our stores after the kill, so they had traveled heavy. We recovered enough blades, pipes, and 3 usable firearms to arm the next defense properly. Food for 6 hard days. Antibiotics, painkillers, bandages, 2 saline kits, and canned beans still intact. Pack found the map on a body near the smoke line. Folded, sealed in waxed paper, marked in Zero's ugly pencil. Routes, caches, smell zones, marine dead streets, and one site circled hard in the south. He brought it to me while I was still washing oil off my hands with water I could barely afford. "You want the good news or the stupid one?" he asked. That meant both mattered. I took the paper. The circled site was an old military storage compound south of the river split. Next to it, Zero had written only 3 words, twice, as if repetition could substitute for explanation. "Do not go, do not go." I looked at the mark, then at the west where the smoke from broken shelves still drifted, then at my own hands. Dark nails, hard joints, blood in the cut lines. Zero had not beaten me. He had priced me. By evening, the lane was quiet except for cleanup and the wet sounds of the Route B dead still chewing through whatever Zero had fed them. We had survived the assault. The city had not finished with us. 3 days after the battle, I finally had numbers that stayed still for a full hour. 2 bodies buried, 1 burned because there was not enough left to bury, 4 badly wounded, 20 still standing. Tan kept his broken arm tied to his chest and insulted anyone who pitied him. Dung stitched a split over his ribs without flinching. I counted every bandage, tablet, and cup of boiled water. The agent we had marked as Zero's quiet man was gone. No corpse, no blood trail, no last mistake I could punish. That bothered me more than the smoke stains still blackening the south wall of the floor. The 2 men with fish traits did not improve fast, but they improved. Sister Lee put both on a strict grain and vegetable rotation, 6 small meals, fixed salt, no canned protein, no exceptions, no hidden stash. By day 3, their eyes tracked people again instead of corners. Their shoulders stopped rolling when they walked. Instinct had not vanished, but reason was back in the room with it. We repaired only what paid back fast. Outer shelves became a new choke lane. Broken carts became mobile cover. Melted oil traps were scraped and filtered. Waste was now a luxury. When I did the morning count, the board finally looked like a base instead of a casualty report. Food for 20 days, water for 14, medicines for 9 hard cases, ammunition still too low to brag about. Combat strength looked better on paper than in flesh. 20 could fight somehow, but only 8 could hold a line under pressure. The rest were runners, lifters, watchers, and cooks. Our control spread across 3 city blocks almost by default. The West Alley, Market Spine, and Housing Roofline fed our routes now. Territory was not pride. It was distance from sudden death. The little rooftop beds gave us the first harvest on the 4th morning. Just greens, barely enough to count as food, but enough to count as proof. A system had begun to feed itself, however slowly. Sister Lee asked for an hour with everyone present and all ledgers open. She laid out her notebooks, meal logs, symptom columns, behavior notes, and one conclusion that made the room quieter than the battle had. "Transformation is manageable," she said. "Not for me alone, for everyone." Then she tapped the pages. Repeated diet shaped the body. Conscious diet slowed instinct. Mixed diet preserved judgment. She had tracked 26 people across 2 weeks, including the dead, the wounded, the stable, and the unstable. Intake, reaction, drift, recovery. Food had become biology, law, and weapon. The important part was not that food changed us. We already knew that. The important part was that planned meals changed us better than fear meals. Random eating made monsters. Structure made tools. Old Wang said the sentence the others needed before they could trust it. Then diet is governance. He was right. If we could plan what people ate, we could plan what they became and what they kept. I put a chalkboard beside the main storage shelves that same hour. Every name, every meal, every symptom, every useful shift, every dangerous one. People hated it for 10 minutes, then fear did my work. We built 3 meal lines by nightfall. Stability for drift risk, labor for builders and haulers. Controlled adaptation for the few willing to gain traits on purpose without losing themselves. May ran the inventory and almost smiled while doing it. For the first time since the city broke, the storeroom was not just a pile. It was a machine. Inputs, outputs, reserves, substitutions, penalties. Pack volunteered for the first controlled revision before I even asked. He had been leaning too far into fish whenever speed was needed. We cut that down and shifted him toward bird protein and grains. His movements changed over 2 days. Less sway, more angle. Faster head turns, better short bursts, less brine smell in his sweat. He noticed it first and grinned like he had cheated the world. Dung resisted the chalkboard first, then came back after dark when nobody else was watching. He looked at my hands, then at his own scarred knuckles, and asked the question without armor. "What do I eat if I want to be useful and not stupid?" he said. That was the first honest sentence he had given me since we met. I answered him with equal honesty. Less red meat, more bird. He frowned as if I had insulted his ancestors. Bird makes me lighter. I nodded. Exactly. You already have enough force. What you lack is recovery speed, angle change, and time between impulse and action. He took the bowl May prepared without another word. Small portions, fixed hours, no doubling back into old stock. In this world, discipline did not start at the wall. It started at the mouth and stayed there. The harder problem was not storage or patrols or healing. It was me. Battle had left marks that no shirt could hide well anymore. Dark nails, hardened joints, a rough plate line over the upper back and chest. I saw people watch my neck when I turned too fast. I caught them staring at the scale pattern fading along the side where the python traits had been. They trusted my planning. My body was another question. By the second night, I heard the whispers clean through 2 aisles of canned goods. He is too changed. What happens when he stops being one of us? Nobody raised a voice. That made it worse, not better. May heard them too. She found me near the water tanks with my ledger open and my hands under the moonlight, like numbers and darkness together might explain what I was becoming. 0 got inside their heads, she said. I kept looking at my fingers. The nails were darker than last week, the joints thicker, the skin over the knuckles no longer fully human even at rest. He wasn't wrong. She did not rush to deny it, and that was why I trusted her. No, she said. He wasn't. That is exactly why you cannot answer it with strength. If people fear what you are, winning more won't fix it. I told her the part I had not said aloud since the system room. Every gain leaves a receipt. I can carry 3 forms cleanly. I can swap. I can calculate. But the body remembers every shortcut I survive with. May put a bowl beside me, simple greens and rice, warm from the lower burners. Then show them you can refuse power too, she said. They need to see the choosing, not only the result. Old Wang had come up the stairs so quietly that only Pak would have heard him sooner. He stopped by the tank ladder and added the line that turned her instinct into doctrine. Lead them by restraint. He looked at my altered hands and did not flinch. If you can show the beast inside you obeys a rule, they will not follow a monster. They will follow the first man who proved it can be done. The next morning, Pa dropped Zero's map on my crate table and stabbed 1 finger at the southern mark. What in that military compound made him write, "Do not go twice"? That bothered him most. It bothered me too. Zero feared very little by the end. If a place scared him enough to warn himself on paper, it was either a trap too large for his army or a resource too unstable to touch yet. Before I could answer, May climbed from the radio corner with 3 copied pages and a face I had learned to respect. She only looked like that when a number stopped being local and started being strategic. She had combined scavenged city maps with the old receiver schedule and a hand-built timing grid. The westward signal was real, repeated nightly, same interval, same power pattern, no storm drift. Coordinates, then 3 words, she said. We study the altered. She said it again slower, as if that could lighten it. It did not. Somebody west of us was mapping changed people on purpose. Pak stopped smiling. Dung stopped chewing. Even old Wang's hands tightened on his cup. Anyone broadcasting openly about altered bodies was stronger than any market tyrant with a food cult. I asked the practical question first because fear wastes less energy when given a task. Direction? May pointed over the map toward the industrial belt and river roads. West, beyond Zero's territory. That gave us 2 future problems instead of 1. South held the warehouse Zero feared. West held organized survivors or hunters who already knew altered people existed and were worth tracking. At the same hour, far north of our blocks, Zero returned to a ruined transport garage with only 9 people close enough to call followers. He walked upright, but one hand kept moving by itself. He looked at his fingers under strip light and watched one curl by itself. The body was finally sending him the bill he had postponed. 8 kinds of hunger had built him. Conflict was taking him apart. He could still think. That was the dangerous part. He calculated losses, routes, pressure points, and leverage with the same speed as before. But each day, one new section of flesh ignored timing. For almost an hour out of every day, his own body became hostile territory. Jaws clenched wrong, vision split, balance shifted, reflexes contradicted one another. He was becoming a civil war. He told none of that to the 9. He only said, "The cook thinks he won because he still counts victories in streets and bodies." Then he led them below the garage into a cold chamber. Behind welded bars, something breathed with the slow mass of heavy machinery cooling after use. It filled a space the size of a delivery truck and turned once when it smelled him. 3 months fed it. That evening, I took first roof watch myself. I wanted silence, distance, and one clean look west before making any promise to the others. The city gave me smoke columns and a sky I did not trust. I heard the helicopter before Pak did. Low rotor beat. Disciplined approach, not random drift and not a newsbird. Private markings, no rescue symbols. It came in from the west and stopped above us. The wash bent the first harvest flat and rattled every loose panel on the roof. I did not run for cover. If they had come this close, they were confirming and measuring, so I let them see me. A man in dark gear leaned from the open side with binoculars braced hard against the wind. He did not scan the roof. He looked directly at me, then at my hands, then at the line of my shoulders under the coat. Next to him, another figure wrote on a fixed pad clipped to the doorframe. The helicopter held position for 8 seconds, then turned west again with smooth confidence and left without warning. Pack reached me as the noise faded. "They were looking for you specifically, weren't they?" he asked. I flexed my fingers once and felt every altered joint answer. Yes. It came easy. He looked toward the dark west. "Is that bad?" I folded Zero's map once, then again, and slid it into my coat. "It means we are late already. We are not the first altered people out here." I kept watching the horizon until the last rotor echo died. And if they study the altered, somebody out there went farther than I did and lived. We move west before they move here.